Sword of Coming Chapter 853. As soon as the old master left, Cui Dongshan immediately picked up a white jade axis on the table side, and wiped it carefully with the white sleeves. One of the joys of life is not to say a false alarm, but also unexpected joy. Don't feel obsessive and kind. Just staying at the gate of the mountain, sitting there drinking tea and sipping melon seeds, is a good talking master. There are a few great monks in the world and 14th realms that no one wants to provoke. It's just that Bai is also a scholar. The old blind man has always been too lazy to pay attention to foreign affairs in the mountain. You can scold as you scold. Don't be heard by the old blind man in person. And the monk who is nicknamed Chicken Soup Monk is so clear that he is a Buddhist dragon elephant with compassion is the heart of the Buddha. Only this stinky nose of the Taoist temple in the East China Sea is the most unrecognizable. Old Guanzhou never said a word to Sui Right from beginning to end. Sui Right originally wanted to take this opportunity to ask more about his husband, but it was difficult to speak when things came to the fore. In fact, Jiang Shangzhen told her some inside stories about the blessed land of the cloud caves, about the wormwood supporter Ni Yuan Pin, what Jiang Huai cut mosquitoes, why he disappeared back then, why he was thrown out of the blessed lotus root blessed land by the old master, and spent a long time in a foreign land. There was a three-legged golden toad on his shoulder. What did Ni Yuan Pin seek? The relationship with Jinding Temple, etc. Jiang Shangzhen had no place to hide. The reason why Jiang Shangzhen is so easy to talk about on the right side of Sui is simple. Both parties eat at the poor mountain. The family does not talk about two things, but it is purely the real-world genealogy Jianxiu and the elder Yugui. The relationship with the suzerain Jiang Shangzhen's reputation has always been stable. Zhou Xian did not sprinkle salt on her wounds, saying that the painstaking effort is worthy of life, and the poor foolish person is always ruthlessly annoyed. Some long-awaited reunion, the more unharmed, the more anxious things are. Sui's expression on the right side was sad, and he did not leave the Luopa mountain without Yujian and returned to the place where the cultivating path was formed. Instead he climbed up the steps, seemingly going to the top of the mountain to enjoy the scenery. Zhou Xian picked up the other shaft head, which looked like white jade material, crystal clear jade, but it was not. Upon closer inspection it turned out to be of horns. The two shaft heads for hanging pictures on the mounting wall are learned. If they are high and low double shafts, they are collectively called the heaven and earth style. If it is a hand scroll spread out from side to side, it is the sun and moon style. Lao Guanzi's Taoist painting is quite special. It only talks about the shaft head. Of course, it belongs to the sun and the moon because the shape of the 5 sacred mountains is built with heaven and earth. Therefore there are pictures of the world, the sun and the moon are surging and the stars are listed. Cui Dongshan held one of the shaft heads and smiled. Whether this thing is buried in the homestead or pasted on the door, it is used to settle the townhouse, or it is sealed by a talisman. Wearing the scroll on the body, a gas trainer travels through mountains and waters. It's almost like being both the lord of the 5 mountains and the god of blasphemy. It has both natural and supernatural powers, and possesses many incredible wonders. Compared with Wu Shuangjiang's couplets that can't be moved, the Taoist paintings of the old masters are more flexible. Some Taoshu scroll, the two combined into one, it becomes a fairy soldier. Zhou Xian asked casually. Once the refining is successful, the shaft of the Taoist book is closed, and the monks of the earth fairy can also swim long distances and climb into the water with this thing? The scroll material should be light and not damage the painting, so the scroll heads of the people's homes are mostly wood. Scholars and wealthy families mostly use gold and jade. The fairy mansion on the mountain, the discerning eye, the 1,000-year-old Ganoderma lucidum, and the porcelain scrolls of blue and white or fighting color. Generally it is said that the horn shaft is easy to be eaten by insects, and there is a lot of moisture when unrolled, but this pair of horn shaft heads is most likely the relic of a fellow monk in the ancient times. It is an extremely rare thing that can be encountered and cannot be found. The key is the scroll in Zhou Lian's hand, which is inscribed with the 2 characters water urn in ink seal, prosecuting the 3 realms, sealing the mountains, examining the merits and appreciating the sins and blessings. In addition, there are more than 100 immortal names written in tiny lower letters. The branch in Cui Dongshan's hand is the 2 characters mountain talisman in the Danshu, and the clouds are transpiring. Heaven and man give urns, there will never be floods, call gods and ghosts and save lives. The image of the mountain by Yuzuan is additionally painted, like a picture of the true worship of the gods. Cui Dongshan shook his head. That's not good. You must be a monk in the upper 5 realms, otherwise you may not be able to handle it, let alone take it for a long distance. The control of an immortal soldier's treasure has always been a difficult problem for all major sections. Cui Dongshan grinned and said, if it is the destiny of the old master, then we will really send it to Luopashan. Attacks are often just a fancy more used to deter. In general there is no use. But if it can transport the natural energy of a place of mountain, water and air, while continuously gathering the spiritual energy of the heavens and the earth, it is the numerology pattern of the heavier the earth and the better. Cui Dongshan sighed. It's a pity, it's a thing from the previous dynasty after all, and it has been passed down to this dynasty by luck. Once the emperor and the courtiers, it will be difficult to order the immortals. Zhou Xian smiled and said, it's just right to be full of 8. The more Cui Dongshan looked at it, the more he felt there was a way out, and he exclaimed, but if Mr. is willing to take this thing and take this thing to Jidu Mountain, it is estimated that he can directly exchange it for a Taishang Dang Dang. As long as Mr. is willing to make a price, Jidu the mountainside will definitely sell iron, even if they owe a debt they are willing to buy it. Cui Dongshan said with emotion, our wealth is finally not thin. This Taoist picture of the old Guanzhu who just succeeded, and the couplets that Wu Shuangjiang gave before. The former can be placed in the Patriarch Hall of Jiaisfeng, and the latter can be hung at the entrance of the Patriarch Hall of the lower sect of Tongdishao. Owning these 2 treasures of the town Luopa Mountain and the future Shezong, you truly have the immortality and confidence of the first-class sect. In addition, there are 2 copybooks that the old scholar asked for from Su Zi and Lu Qi. The flowers are posted and the drunk posts are all energetic and enlightenment. There is both charcoal in the snow and icing on the cake. In the future, as long as Luopa Mountain really opens its branches and leaves, it is estimated that a lot of reading seeds will emerge. Cui Dongshan turned his head and shouted at the millet grain, the right guard has made another great contribution after sailing overnight. At the beginning of the night ship, Qin Pingon and his party were sent to the side by Wu Shuang to wait and see. The result was good, but the process was extremely dangerous. After that, if it weren't for the ingenuity of the millet grains, with Wu Shuangjiang's indifferent temperament, he would not be able to give out the treasure of Xianshan with the rank of immortal soldier under the premise that he had already sent out a piece of, at the time. This post at the time, is now hung in the first floor of the bamboo building where Qin Pingon lived. The 2 seals printed on the copybook have lost all the rhyme of Taoism and replaced it with the repair of the outer Huatian demon. For each word has a realm. There is only 1 monogram left in the copybook. Heart is like a green lotus in the world, still mysterious. The millet grains were so confused that they couldn't even take a look at it. He scratched his head and asked, what? Why did you do something again? Cui Dongshan puts a pair of shaft heads in his sleeves, and is ready to start to refining and melting the 2 things in the Taoist book. It is a dual purpose. Don't delay Cui Dongshan's chat with the millet grains. Say it, you must take this credit. Xiao Mili stood up, ran all the way to the table and asked curiously, is the things the old master gave us always valuable? Zhou Xian smiled and nodded, it's valuable. The 2 scroll heads are quite old if it's just that picture. The millet grains were soaring and he laughed and said, the old man is an old leader and the old things he gave are always valuable. The little girl in black did not patronize and was happy. She looked over the mountain road, scratched her face and whispered, I don't know when I will be a guest again. The temper of the old master is very good. Rao is Cui Dongshan who has to be speechless. This old master of the East China Sea has a good temper, that is recognized by the mountain. Millet grains retracted their gaze, lay on the table and said with a smile, Old chef, I have done a good job again. When the good people and mountain masters return home from the capital, you can help us make a good meal. Must be better than the best. It's more delicious, don't you know, can't it? Xiao Mili didn't even ask how much the credit was, as if her little head, melon seeds, could not think of these things at all. Zhou Xian smiled and nodded, no problem. In fact, on the night ship Wu Shuangjiang also gave an extra set of Zhou rice grains, a set of 1 fang qing to supply Zhou rice grains, which are all things Wu Shuangjiang carried with him, and the vision of the Sui Chu Gong Palace Master was so high in the world. They are all famous and you can imagine their appearance. The 3 magic weapons are invaluable and each has a magical effect. Back to Luopa Mountain, the millet grains were immediately sent out, and the Qibao mud, which was known as 1 or 2 colored mud and 1 caddy of rain money, was given to Sister Nuanshu. then gave the ancient inkstone with the inscription Xianxia Cave, and a pair of pocket dragons to Jingqing. As for the green bamboo brush, there is a line of small seals and the chest is full of bamboo. Was given by millet grains to Wei Shanjun, who was so poor that he could only spend nights in banquets and earn red envelopes. Cui Dongshan exhaled, "It's done." Zhou Xian was surprised, "So fast?" Cui Dongshan grinned and said, "It's not too fast for Brother Dafeng to look at those fairy pictures. Just flip a few pages and it's done. Anyway, Jing Dafeng is not there, just say it." Zhou Xian smiled and said, "After all, he is still a young and strong guy who can pancakes on his ass. If he is replaced by Wei Shanjun, he will definitely be able to turn to the end." Weibo was not there anyway. Fortunately, the millet grains did not hear this and was planning to write a menu for the old cook. Thinking of a dinner table full of dishes and plates, people don't know how to put the chopsticks there first. The more they think about it, the more greedy Hurry Up wiped his mouth. Cui Dongshan took out the complete road map with the shaft head, gently placed it on the table and smiled. The old master of the world really knows the world, and the world is unparalleled. After Daotu is refined, purple air is lingering and clouds rise, as if a table is a world of Daofa, and the vision of the sun and the moon is faintly visible. On the top of the mountains, there is no 2 days and there is a month in the tens of thousands of trees. In the heart of Cui Dongshan and Zhou Xian, they just listen to the old master sneer, "Pick up people's teeth." Cui Dongshan pinched Daoju with both hands, meditating silently in his heart. A book on the table, fleeting, and the next moment, the whole desolate mountain boundary is covered with purple air. Weibo shrank the mountains and rivers, and immediately came from Piyun Mountain to the tableside of Luopa Mountain. Weibo's heart was shaken and he used Shanjun's life and supernatural powers, looked around, and his vision he was like being in a sea of purple clouds, and at the same time he even felt a breath of victory over the great road, which made Dang Tang Beiyue Dashan feel uncomfortable, and the momentum of this victory is getting heavier and heavier. Weibo smiled bitterly. Could it be that I can only show up in the future? On the edge of the fallen mountain boundary walk to this point? Monarch Daoist Mountain walking on his own site is inconvenient and he has to walk on foot. It is estimated that the joke that spreads out is more laughable than the joke at night. Cui Dongshan smiled and said, "It's okay. I will set up a gate on the mountain and under the mountain to make sure that Mr. Wei Shan goes back and forth at will." The higher the realm of the mountain and water gods and the cultivators, the more uncomfortable they are. Even if the Qixin and his like were aware of it, they would not be struggling like Weibo. Moreover, this Taoist book cannot be in a state of being unfolded all the time, otherwise the Tao Qi will be scattered, and it will be more self-gathering and replenishment than the aura of the heavens and the earth, and the mountains and rivers will be able to make ends meet. Weibo didn't care about this. He took a seat and asked, "What's the matter?" The old master of Donghai was sitting in Brother Weiss' position just now. Cui Dongshan shook his snow-white sleeves and said with a smile, "As for the inside story, I won't say much, I don't know better. There is a cloud in Buddhism and the proposal is Baiyun Wanli." Weibo stood up in silence and changed seats. At the top of the cloud mountain, the old Guan looked up and saw that the mountain monarch surnamed Wei is still quite interesting, and then quietly left. Cui Dongshan said, "Since the weather is about to change, we should plan ahead and make plans early. Anyway, Weibo is not an outsider. As long as those illusory avenues of luck are not involved, there is nothing to say." Zhou Xian nodded and said, "You must not have the heart to harm others, and you must not have the heart to defend against others." Before, Qin Pingon targeted the swordsman Pei Min, an ascendant sword repairman, and later in the night sailing battle he dealt with Wu Shuangjiang's 14 realms. Now it seems that it is necessary. Far away Zouzi. Swordsmanship Pei Min Jianxiu Lukai. Closer the great sword fairy Bai Chong who had fallen short of Luzhou and Beiju. The behind-the-scenes forces including Han Yushu. The rivers and lakes are sinister, treacherous, unpredictable, and making friends is often making enemies. Cui Dongshan said, "The only thing missing now is the realm of the husband. The most powerful attack on Luopa Mountain is on the top of the mountain. The mountain Song Yuzhong has been transferred to Chiduan Mountain by the Dali court, and opened a separate mountain shrine and temple. The former site of the mountain temple on the top of the Luopa Mountain has not been demolished and reconstructed. The original appearance is maintained, but the plaque has been taken off. Cui Dongshan's a golden thunder pond was set up along the white jade railing to enshrine the sword fairy picture from the Great Wall of Sword Qi. It was originally from the upside-down mountain Jingjian Pavilion, and was later handed over to Qin Pingon by the old sword fairy. On the side of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, those sword immortals in the posture of heroic spirits have accompanied young hidden officials for many years, fending off enemies together, and guarding half of the Great Wall of Sword Qi. In addition, Luopa Mountain also has a set of sword formations born out of Taiping Mountain and Tongyi's Hao, but it has not yet been completed so far and can be used as an aid in the future. Zhou Xian said, with the temper of the sun, the sword formation scroll will definitely be returned to Fei Xingcheng. Cui Dongshan smiled and said, don't worry, with the temper of the teacher, you will definitely not accept it. Moreover, in the long run the picture scroll will remain in the Luopa Mountain. For Fei Xingcheng it is a cost-effective business with a steady profit. Xiaomi Li nodded and said, don't worry, we are good people and we will listen to Mrs. Shanju anyway. Zhu Lian shook his head and smiled. Wrong, as long as you encounter real major events, Miss Ning will still listen to the sun. Xiaomi Li thought for a while. It seems to be alas. Cui Dongshan smiled and said, even without the sword fairy formation now in Aquarius Island, if we don't take the initiative to take the initiative, others should burn incense. Took out a folding fan of Yuzhu, Cui Dongshan gently fanned, while writing to convince people with morality, while writing that he refused to accept and killed him. Wei Bo said, I have already helped out the matter of Luopashan not accepting disciples, but it doesn't seem to be very useful and the effect is very average. More and more people will come here in the future. Cui Dongshan helped the millet grains fan and smiled and said, normally, everyone is curious to see flowers in the fog. In the end we still have to talk about chances if we can climb the mountain. Who can knock the seeds of millet grains? Oh, yes. Millet Grains sat on the bench, shook his little feet, the breeze was blowing and he pulled the cotton satchel, laughing. Wei Wei asked with a smile. Millet, have you thought about it? What are you going to give in return? The green bamboo pen presented by Millet Grains is of great significance to Wei Bo, and he won't change it with a half-soldier. Qin Lingjun had previously escorted Millet Grains to Piyun Mountain, and now he goes to the bamboo forest from time to time, but in the summer and autumn he said to see if there are any bamboo shoots to dig. Xiaomi Li shook his head and said, no need, just a polite hammer. Mr. Wei Shan will see you outside. Wei Bo stood up, touched the head of the millet grain and left. The millet grains went back to the small bamboo chair to watch the door, and let the old cook and the big white goose continue to talk about business. Cui Dongshan wrapped his arms in his sleeves and said, the old master seems to be treating you with admiration. Julian laughed off. According to legend, Lu Qin has 5 dreams, each with unreasonable avenue manifestations. Among them is the real bones of Taoism, and the scholar Jing Chong of Confucianism. In addition, there are 7 mysterious minds: wooden chickens, trees, moles, kunping, cardinals, buzzards and butterflies. Among them, Eugenie, who was the first to cultivate immortality in Uwafudi, was the wooden chicken who was dumbfounded. Uwafudi's picture scroll 4 people, although according to the definition of Hauran Tianxia, they are all genuine and pure martial arts. But the 4 have their own emphasis. Sui right side perseverance directly gave up martial arts, turned to mountaineering and became sword repairers. Wei Xian never intended to reach the top of martial arts, preferring to be on the battlefield and to be an official, the biggest official. God knows if this guy who claims to drink a lot of alcohol will directly find a site in the future such as the Tongya Island broken in the mountains and rivers, and become the founding emperor again. Lu Baixiang seems to be the least ambitious compared to Sui right side and Wei Xian. As for Zhu Lian, in the eyes of outsiders, he is the one who does not seek improvement. Cui Dongshan closed the folding fan and looked up at the sky. He by Yujing. Zhu Lian asked. The general idea that the old master said before? The first sentence is easy to guess, the last one? There is no Qin Qingdu in the world who can open up the mountain with the sword. Cui Dongshan shook his head. God knows. Zhu Lian glanced at the sky and smiled. Forget it. Don't talk about these annoying things. You can only drink and talk about Fengyue tonight. Sunlight makes paper, the night is like ink, the world is polished and the thoughts become words. Cui Dongshan took out 2 pots of wine, threw a pot to Zhu Lian and drank each. Julian was drinking. I must be Lu Qin? Can't Lu Qin be me? Qin Lingjun returned to Qilong Alley, and directly asked for a pot of wine from Brother Jia. When he arrived at a large bowl he drank it all in one gulp. Qin Lingjun sat cross-legged on the bench and said in a low voice, Brother Jia, don't you know I saw 3 outsiders today? The old fairy Jia asked, "Did you fight? Have you ever taken advantage of it? Do you need my brother to help you find a place?" Regarding lip service, our brothers use reason to convince people and there is no one who can't. Qin Lingjun hesitated and gave up the idea of divulging the secrets of heaven. Firstly, this matter should not be concealed. Secondly, it was said by the most holy master. It seems that as long as those key words are involved, there is no way to speak even if it is curved. It's impossible to come and go. Qin Lingjun sighed. It was a pity on earth, wiped his forehead and finally got a new sweat. The old fairy Jia was shocked and he came directly to the idiot. Qin Lingjun smiled bitterly, just raised a bowl and sat down on the floor before sitting and talking. The patriarch of Sanjiao seemed to be standing on the street. As soon as he thought of this, Qin Lingjun was sweating and had to change the subject. Chief Zhou is not on the mountain, he is still a bit lonely. The guy is rich, interesting, free, read, drink and brag. Based on Jiang Shangzhen's sentence, if you have to work hard to practice, would you not bully someone like me and a genius like Lingjun? Qin Lingjun was willing to admire the chief worshipper and agree with him. In addition, Jiang Shangzhen's wine table talks, a set of sets, very chewy, more powerful than any other dishes. Useless is a scholar, but the most difficult thing is the scholar's failure. The prodigal son will not change his head. The most pitiful is the prodigal son. What are the blooming willows, the beautiful scenes, the Yingyan dance and the powder cave? In fact, these are not important. The key is that Jiang Shangzhen slapped his chest to make sure that he will arrange for the three brothers to break into the hero's grave when he arrives at the Cloud Cave blessed land. I never thought of a small riding dragon lane. There are two heroes, Jingqing brother and Zhao old god. So Jiang Shangzhen learned everything, saying that Qilong Alley is definitely a treasure of geomantic omen. He learned the law of palm and has a long life. He spent a lot of money to buy 3 houses in Qilong Alley. What kind of ability is money? It's willing to spend money. Jiang Shang really lived longer than that man and he was much more generous. It was meaningless to say that the competition for fame and fortune other than food and clothing is always petty. So at the wine table, the chief of the week threw all 3 sets of keys to the blind old Daoist priest, saying that they were all his own brothers. In the future, Brother Jia will help increase the popularity of the warm house. I will not talk about them. Money is no longer money and it hurts brotherhood for nothing. The old fairy Jia was flushed with drinks, his face was awe-inspiring. He took the key, waved his hand and talked about money between brothers. The blind old Taoist took the 2 apprentices and moved to a new house that same day. The expensive furnishings in the house are estimated to be the same as the generals of Dali capital. He stood at the door, dressed in a snow-white robe of the fallen mountain palm. Qin Lingjun immediately put his foot off the bench and shouted, "Sister Changming." Old Immortal Jia also immediately put down the wine bowl in his hand and raised his subconsciously. Seeing that the brother Lingjun did not get up, but did not put down his ass, he did not hesitate to hang his in the air and bend down slightly. As for whether the woman could see this scene, the old gods don't care. Where does this evening blessing come from? In addition to the unique insight of the mountain owner, he was singled out in the vast sea of people, and he was a strong old hero, and he also relied on this kind of sincere treatment that is compatible with the road of Luopa Mountain. I see that the high is first short. On one end the old smiled and said, Zhonglu came to the cold house and the expensive feet are on the cheap ground. It is really a celebration of Chaimen, the flourishing of the house, the bitterness without alcohol and wine. If you don't mind the long life of the palm. Long Life squinted and smiled, whined. The old fairy Jia changed his speech. The palm is fast and the people talk quickly and teach people to save worry and effort. Changming said, if you block the way you have a snack. The old fairy Jia said solemnly, I have no shirk. Minger will go out in person. Previously, there was no mention of his name on the side of Luopa Mountain. It was only to let the disciple Zhao Dengao work on this matter. Old Xianxia Jia held it back. Otherwise he only talked about the ability to deal with people. Jia Xing thinks he is in Luopa Mountain and can be ranked the least. Fifth, receiving salary in Luopa Shenyaya. Jia Xing naturally has no burden to say that only taking money but not taking care of it, but the big white goose that haunts and now the chief executive who smiles to everyone. Life. I really can't help him lie down and enjoy the blessing every day. With the lifting of the ban on the Hauran Xianxia Shenshua Dibo, and the Jingua Shuiyu of Xingyang Mountain, people from all walks of life who visited Luopa Shen came in swarms, coming from all directions of the mountains and rivers. 1 to 2 The entire Longzhou boundary, big and small inns, are overcrowded. Of course, there are more people who come here to watch the excitement, and it may not be just what you want. For example, the genealogical masters of various roads, the Beiwepiyun mountain, which was originally a tourist attraction, now there is one more Luopa mountain born out of the sky, plus the gods of the mountains and rivers in Longzhou are not low in the gods of the Izhou landscape genealogy. I believe that Luopa mountain will soon face the noisy scene of visitors like crucian carp crossing the river. I admire the chi trainers of the sword Immortal, and the martial arts masters who want to learn martial arts skills with those martial arts masters. There must be many mountain fairies who want to open the mirror at the gate of Luopa mountain. Among them, there are also martial arts masters from various countries who want to ask Pei Qian about the boxing. Of course, no one comes here to win punches, they just compete and ask for advice. There are mountains and rivers and there are so many martial arts, but Pei Qian is one of the 4 great masters of Wu Ping. He asked her if he still wanted to win. Was he crazy? Go and ask the monster monks who gave Grandmaster Pei a few punches to open the flowers on the battlefield with the capital. Do they agree? Because of the previous fairy discussions, Qin Pingon said that in the last 20 years, Luopishan would not accept disciples. Therefore something more happened. On the Luopishan side, someone needs to be responsible for blocking the road and inform all the outsiders of this matter, especially if they need to stop them from climbing without permission, and use Luopishan as a place to enjoy the scenery. There are only 2 roads leading to Luopa Mountain. In addition to the mountain road on the side of Huaihuang County, there are also roads extending from Hongzhou Town and Chiduan Mountain. For the time being responsible for blocking the road, there are Yunzi by Xian Zhao Shuxiao in Ming, and Zhao Denggao, the disciple of the blind old Taoist Jiaxing. Doing this kind of thing is also an experience. There are Zhang Lv Chong Ming and Jian Xiu Cui Wei in the dark to prevent accidents. Only Bai Xian is purely on the pole to join in the fun. Anyway, Pei Qian just happened not to be in Luopa Mountain recently. Bai Xian is now more familiar with the left guardian of Qilong Lane. Often squat on the ground and ask if you want to eat? That's the one. As long as the hero threatens to challenge Pei Qian, Bai Xian is prepared to not fall behind, and all are carefully recorded, name and nickname hometown martial arts state. Qin Lingjun did not interfere with this for the first time ever. Muanshu and Xiamiliang were very surprised. Of course, Qin Lingjun was pretending to be an expert, his mother a mixture of fish and dragons, and God knows if there was any expert who beat him to death. After all, in a huge river and lake, it is impossible to meet a good brother like Busy and Qin Qinglu. The rivers and lakes outside are difficult to mix, and it is not enough to rely on boldness. On the road to practice, there are either wild horses or pigs out of the pen one by one. Today was a big table for dinner. It was lively. It is still the old rule that cannot be beaten by thunder. If Qin Pingon is not on the mountain, the main bench will be empty and must be left to the mountain owner. Zhu Lian, Tui Dongshan, Miyu, Qin Wanshu, Millet Grains, Qin Lingjun, Zhang Jiazhen. There is also Bai Xian who likes to come here to eat and drink. Wei Wenlong, who doesn't show up very much, is not a cultivator of Jin Danqi. He doesn't need to use grains. It's not how the god of wealth of the fallen mountain is so withdrawn. He is obsessed with settling accounts. Every book is just his daughter-in-law. As for Zhao Shuxiao and Zhao Denggao, they walk back to the town every day, taking turns to watch the night on the road, one mountain master's biography, one named offering, and the 2 have a good relationship now. They are obviously very different styles from Qin Lingjun and Bai Xian. Qin Lingjun was suffocating at the dinner table. Old cook, I heard that when you were young, you were still the only beautiful man in 10 miles and 8 villages? Zhu Lian, every chopsticks, no matter what the food, will chew slowly, so barely ugly. Qin Lingjun smiled and said, then you are still a bachelor. When you were young your eyes were too high and you didn't have a satisfied girl. In the end you can only be like Brother Dafeng? Zhu Lian smiled and said, forget that you are older than me? Qin Ling all eats flat. Millet Grains raised her palms to her mouth and asked Muanshu's sister quietly, how old is Jing Qing? The girl in the pink skirt looked at the boy in Qingyi, shook her head and whispered, I haven't asked, I don't know. Qin Lingjun patted the table, stupid girl, coveting my beauty, right? I was caught upright, haha. As a result, Miyu slapped Miyu on the back of the head. Qin Lingjun bowed his head and pulled the rice in the bowl. The sword Immortal me dared to provoke him. He was a little depressed. Tui Wei is a sword repairer in the Yuan-Ing realm of the Great Wall of Sword Qi. As a result, he saw his grandfather like his grandson on Mi Yes side. Qin Lingjun felt that something was wrong before. Later, from the well-informed brother Jia, he heard about that "me stopped the waste," coupled with some deeds of the old Dragon City battlefield. Qin Lingjun's liver trembled, and the result was scared that he did not dare to find Miyu as his brother. Zhu Lian glanced at Zhang Jiazhen. Reluctant to speak, but there is often a smile in his eyes. When he came Shonen Lang. Now he is a young man who can grow his beard. Standing with Jiang Chu of the same age, they seem to be 10 years old. Jiang Shangzhen actually went to him in private and said that he, the chief worshipper, can practice spiritual practice with a little money. With good luck, there is hope in this life to be among the middle 5 realms of Dongfu realm and then stop there. Even if luck is average, there is still a chance to get a good trainer from 4 realms and 5 realms. If you feel uncomfortable, you can treat it as borrowing money. Later, relying on the salary of Luopashan, you can repay the money slowly. But Zhang Jiazhen still did not agree and had her own plan, and finally asked Chief Zhou a few questions unexpectedly. 2 jiazi time, maybe one of them needs to be used to practice with great concentration, the years of the cultivator's mountain dwelling, dealing with the changes of cold and heat, the circulation of the 4 seasons. It has a completely different look and feel from ordinary masters. Anyone sitting in a meditation retreat can take days or even months of time. Zhang Jiazhen followed Mr. Wei, fascinated. Even if he only learned a little, this account is not difficult to calculate. In addition, there is an account which is not confused and the truth is false. Why should Jiang Shangzhen help him? Naturally, it was Mr. Chen's face. Besides money, it was Mr. Chen's favor. Maybe Sect Master Jiang is indeed rich and powerful and he can ignore it at all, but Zhang Jiazhen himself has to be more truthful. Mr. Wei didn't like to reason, but when he let him in the door on the first day, he had a heart-to-heart remark with Zhang Jiazhen, saying that we are in the business of accounting. The most important thing is not how smart. It's honesty and conscience. Before Jiang Shangzhen went down the mountain to the wild world, he found Zhu Lian and said with a smile, "The mountain master is picking the treasure." It is not that there is a Zhang Jiazhen in Luopa Mountain who can earn a few more gods, but a Luopa Mountain with Zhang Jiazhen will be more like Luopa Mountain. Because what Zhang Jiazhen and Jiang Shangzhen asked about was whether he could become a mountain ghost and mountain in the future and stay in the mountain for a long time. Do more small things within your power. If it is not feasible, just let the fate. If it is feasible, then he will start saving money from the same day. If the money is not enough, he will definitely borrow from Chief Zhou without any embarrassment. When we were walking at night together, Jiang Shangzhen looked at the bright-eyed young man, who was no longer a poor boy from the Great Wall of Jianqi, Mr. Xiaofang, as if saying, "Mr. Qin brought me here from my hometown, then I would try my best not to let him." Mr. Qin was disappointed. This was a matter of course and it was not hard at all. Jiang Shangzhen handed over a jug of wine. Zhang Jiazhen said that she had to read a few account books when she went back, so she stopped drinking. Jiang Shangzhen smiled and said that if he didn't drink too much he would be fine and refreshing. Zhang Jiazhen accepted the pot of wine. Zhang Jiazhen went back to the room, looked through the account books under the lamp, did not drink, just planned to take it, and occasionally was really tired, rubbed his brows, glanced at the hip flask on the table, held back a smile and said to herself, "Zhang Jiazhen, now bullish. Oh, this is the drink that Sect Master Jiang personally gave you." I didn't know that Sect Master Jiang was sitting on the wall with arms around his chest, squinting and smiling without alcohol in his hands, like drinking alcohol. Upper Mountain is time to hold the mirror flower water moon of its own mountain. Zhu Lian smiled and said, "When the sun returns home, let's discuss the beautiful things. Which mountain to do, who will do what, we need to discuss it carefully." Bai Xianqi smiled and said, "Discuss a hammer and let me Dajiangxian stop over there. The entire Aquarius Island fairies are going to commit nympho. That's smashed fairy money." Miu shook his chopsticks. Compared to the mountain owner, it's still far behind. Bai Xian said with white eyes, "I said you are better than Master Hermit? Follow me here." Miu kept smiling and gave Bai Xian a chopstick dish. "If you can talk so well, eat more." Bai Xian sneered and said, "What you learn from that money? Do you have a grudge?" Cui Dongshan laughed. Bai Xian immediately took a chopstick to Cui Dongshan, and asked curiously, "Apart from Hidden Officer, is there anyone Pei Qian is afraid of?" Cui Dongshan said, "Yes, Guizhuzhou." Bai Xian was stunned for a long time. Of course he had heard of Guizhuzhou in his hometown, a famous existence. She seemed to have entered the summer palace as a hidden official sword repairer. After a meal, Wan Shu and Xiao Mili helped to clean up the dishes, but in the end the old cook was alone, and the 2 little girls were not asked to help. They put on aprons and washed them in the stove alone. Zhou Xian cleaned up, took off his apron, walked out of the stove and smiled. Everyone is a book writer in their own life, and at the same time looking at others is turning the book. Maybe the world takes us very lightly, but we take ourselves too seriously. A ferry slowly entered the land of Dali capital. 2 monks from the earthly branch, Song Su and Yu Yufeng, boarded the ship. Song Jisun put down the books in his hand, walked out of the house and came to the bow. Song Shushu clasped his fist and said, Dali worships Song Su and I board the ship to see the prince. Yu clasped his fists and smiled. Yu has seen the prince. Song Jisun smiled and said, Is this a posture of business affairs? Song Su helplessly said, My nephew has seen the emperor. Song Jisun said, As long as I take off the robe of the feudal king, I will only be a commoner of Huaihuang County. You don't need to be nervous when you travel through the capital. Song Su shook his head, still insisting on his own opinion. Uncle Emperor, this still won't work. Song Jisun turned his head to look at the little girl from the Yu family of Shangzhou Kingdom, and smiled. Find a drink for yourself. You can find as much as you can. In the early years of the feudal mansion, Song Jisun was in a line of 10 people with this group of earthly branches. Neither wooing nor alienating, just stop. Yu palms with boxing, his face is full of joy. Song Su, the emperor, is really a kind and honest man, but unfortunately he has not married and had children yet, and I don't know which woman will be cheaper in the future. Since she had obtained the decree of the feudal lord, she went over and over again. Song Jisun turned his head and said to a monk who accompanied the army, Tell me to go down. The ferry is temporarily hovering here. Don't hurry. The monk nodded and left silently. Song Jisun lay on the railing and Song Shubi respectfully stood aside. A prince and a prince, together overlooking the Song's mountains and rivers below the ferry. Song Jisun asked casually, You seem to have matured a little more at this meeting. Have you figured it out? Song Su nodded. Song Jisun didn't say much about it. Even in a family, as long as there are too many people, the head of the family treats children as well, and there will be big and small biases. What is eccentricity? It means that in the same rain, less rain falls on your own fields than people. There are some comforts from others, even if it is out of good intentions, it will be better if it is like nothing. Just as the listener must drink a large pot of bitter water alone, the speaker puts some sugar in his mouth. After that it will only teach people to feel more bitter. Now the ruling and the opposition. The current Majesty's Wenji Wugong is regarded as the best of the Song dynasty emperors. Song Jisun smiled and said, I just figured it out by myself and I brought you a gift. It is 2 inkstones, both of which are imitated. It is said that they were circulated from the old Zhuing royal family and are not worth a few gods. The 2 ancient inkstones, imitating the 36-hole sky inkstone and the 72 blessed land inkstones, are filled with red sandalwood inlaid jade boxes with beautiful inkstone bags, handwritten and official script inscriptions. Each inkstone has 36 stone eyes and 712 make the eye column. As Song Jisun said, it's not valuable but it's a good sign. Since Song Su decides to practice with peace of mind and become on the mountain, Song Jisun, the emperor uncle, gave this to his nephew. It is very appropriate if Song Su has not figured it out. It can also be used as a kind reminder. Song Jisun asked casually, Have you met Qin Pingon and dealt with? Song Su smiled bitterly and said, I have suffered a lot. If I can't beat it, I can't calculate it. The elder Song Jisun was a bit unkind. Instead of comforting his nephew, he gloated a bit unabashedly. He patted the railing, squinted his eyes and smiled, no surprise. Song Su asked curiously, The relationship between Huang Shu and Mr. Qin, a neighbor for many years, seems to be more complex? Song Jisun nodded and said, It's hard to say a word. I haven't become a close friend and fortunately I haven't become an enemy. A reminder, if there is no way, don't provoke Qin Pingan. Most people are too poor to eat and give food and drink, just being content. Qin Pingan is not the same. Every time Lin Yuan envy fish, he will immediately retreat and form a net. It is better to learn to fish than to get it. He learns things faster than Lu Xianyang but is more stable because of learning. Slow probably because I think it's hard to come by, so I cherish it even more, love the new and never tire of the old. Such people, if they are enemies, are actually terrifying. Song Su rubbed his cheeks vigorously. Indeed, Mr. Qin attacked the enemy with endless methods, and the magical powers were so complicated that it was incredible. The fairy has another guest. Zhao Yu, the right servant of the Li ministry. Song Su is a junior and Zhao Yu is an old friend of classmates from the same hometown. The emperor, His Majesty, is still very measured. Song Jisun smiled and waved. Zhao Mamudu, it's been a long time since I saw you. When will we meet again in the year of hoofing between clouds and water? Zhao Yao saluted and then asked, don't play chess and talk about things while playing chess? Song Jisun smiled and said, no more. You are now on the mountain with successful cultivation, thoughtful and prosperous. I will definitely lose, and will not give you a chance to find a place. Zhao Yu suddenly said, Song Jisun, I didn't misunderstand the wrong person. You are indeed amazing. Since he was young, Zhao Yu, who was born in a wealthy family on Fulu Street, has admired Song Jisun in a mess. When the two were studying together under Mr. Chi's school, whether it was playing chess or reading interpretation, they were better than Zhao Yao. So Zhao Ye's attitude towards Song Jisun in Ni Ping Lane is somewhat similar to Qin Ping's attitude towards Lu Xianyang. Song Jisun patted Zhao Yu on the shoulder and smiled and said, is it better to praise me or to praise your own vision? You can do it, there is no officialdom in these years. I can talk more than when I was a kid. Zhao Yu laughed and said, you can do two things with one stone and everyone is happy. Song Su was a little surprised. Although Zhao Yao is a young official in the center, he does treat people kindly. He has a very good reputation in the Dali court. The only flaw is that he lacks a clear body of imperial examination fame. Make contributions on the battlefield. The carp jumps through the dragon gate. Jimao Cave Wild Fox Meditation. Ku Song Su always thinks that Zhao Yu is an extremely proud and arrogant man. Like a lonely cloud and wild crane that only stops and rests in that temple. One day, it will row out the clouds and shake its wings in the blue sky. Nowadays, the ruling and opposition parties are all curious about the fact that King Song Mu and Zhao Yu of the Ministry of Rites can be regarded as direct disciples of Wen Sheng's line. Song Jisun joked, I have seen your Uncle Qin. How are you doing? Zhao Shi smiled and said, not bad, very harmonious. Leaving the alley where Zhou Haijing was temporarily staying, Qin Pingon was unsteady, raised his foot and stomped on the ground, and then took the next step, making it much easier. Qin Pingon raised a hand, slightly rusty, but still instantly gathered the aftermath of Taoism. The self who stayed in the Hauran world is the same 14th realm. Therefore Qin Pingon is just such a simple stomping action. For Dai capital it is a stormy weather. Qin Pingon glanced at the direction of the Jingqing Qintian supervisor. He must have been aware of it, and of course there is also the imitation by Yujing who accompanied the capital. The Qintian supervisory office in the Dali capital city is a heavily guarded forbidden area. It is said that the level of martial law is second only to Miyagi and the imperial tombs. There are not many people, and the total number of officials from various academies is less than 200. Among the many yamen in Dali, it is the most clouded and foggy place without mountains or dew. Is mostly passed down from generation to generation, and the sons inherit their father's business. All officials of the Qintian supervisor shall not be transferred to other officials. If there are vacancies, they will be filled in the Qintian supervisor level by level. Non-special decree of the imperial court shall not be easily promoted or resigned. Therefore it is an iron rice bowl that cannot be thrown away. It has two meanings. Without outsiders vying for it, you can't let it go. Although all officials of the Qintian supervisor are in the Dali capital, they are actually isolated from the world and have little contact with the outside world. Every time they go out, they need to be reviewed and reported by the internal and the Ministry of Etiquette. Each time they go out, they are specially made. Guandi once used needs to be destroyed and then recorded. The people inside dare not make friends with clinging officials, and the Beijing officials outside dare not deal with the Qintian supervisor. If it's a little bit cross-boundary, it's easy to throw off the official hat or the kind where the head falls along with it. Qin Pingon walked slowly in an alley. The same rice raises hundreds of people. Looking at this vast world, it seems that everyone is blind and touching the elephant. Different fields of view and different angles will result in different results. Pure martial arts, as far as the field of vision can be, many real objects are all dazzling, and the cultivator can vaguely see the circulation of the spiritual energy of the heavens and the earth, in addition to the spirit of the gods. As Qin Ping's thoughts fluctuated, the world seemed to have undergone subtle changes. The closer to the direction of the Great Wall of Sword Qi or the Wild World, the current realm temporarily borrowed from Luqian will decay faster. When the same person came, there was still a distinction between primary and secondary. This is reasonable. Otherwise, by relying on the 14-realm cultivation base rushing to the barren world, wouldn't it be equivalent to creating two 14 realms out of thin air? The Saint of Rights was at the Rinyun Iyun building. Why did you agree to try again? Have you already seen this step along the upstream and downstream of that long river of time? Then Li Xing hopes to take this opportunity to do what? If the saints of rituals do it casually and have no purpose, then Qin Pingon, who possesses this method, can actually do many things, such as going back to his hometown of Luopa Mountain, or traveling far to the north at the cost of falling down Luzhou or Tongyi's Hao. Broadcast, the novel app I'm using recently. App. Both Android and iPhone support. Qin Pingon suddenly had a strong thought. Stepped out of Dali Capital and appeared directly in the backyard of Yang's pharmacy. As a result, I saw a young Daoist priest. Daozu smiled and asked, "Since childhood alone looking after the stars of the past, is it hard to work?" Sort of coming. Chapter 854. The juvenile Dao Tong stood on the steps, and the old man Yang from the drugstore often sat there holding a dry tobacco rod, swallowing clouds and fog. Standing under the eaves, Qin Pingon hit a well-mannered chief inspector silent. It's not that Qin Pingon is playing mystery, but that he really doesn't know how to answer. The main reason is that Li Lu is involved, so he has to bite the bullet and get bored. The young Dao Tong shook his sleeves and returned to a Confucian polite, smiling without saying a word. The boy sat on the steps and stretched out a hand. "Sit anywhere, we are all guests, so don't worry too much. I am a passerby, and so are you temporarily but not necessarily in the future." Qin Pingon moved to sit on the bench and sat opposite the young man on the patio, where he returned to the hall by Four Waters. There is no need to guess the identity of the young Taoist boy in front of him. Once riding a bull to pass through the barren world, he would hit the old throne great demon back to the bottom of the ancient well with a single finger, leaving an indelible mark on his opponent for thousands of years. It even made the great ancestor ascend far away from the sky and dare not show up. Rao is Daochang, son of Daxuandu Temple, such a master of Taoism who will greet the true invincibility every 3 chasing 5. It is rumored that when he traveled the vast world, he and Bai Yi and others often mentioned the Dao ancestor who founded Bai Yujing, the same as Yu Rongyan vowed to guarantee that the best fight in the world is our Qingming world. On Daoist's side, pretending to understand and pretending to be confused is meaningless. As for pretending to be confused, it is even more laughable and generous. Dao ancestor glanced at the 14 scenes of Qin Pingon and said with a smile, "The word ritual is difficult to have both reason and reason. The little master is still very powerful." Then Daozu said, "You can accommodate the realm of Lu Shen with very little dispersal, not only because of the saints of etiquette and Lu Shen, but also because of your own empty boat. It has a lot to do with Dao. Collecting the virtual, the empty heart is also the heart, and the empty one is wide. Just say that among the people you know, Zhou Tui Yang, Qi Jing Chun Jing Juzhong, and Wu Shuangjiang are all similar scholars. To put it in a more common way, one person you can eat a lot on an empty stomach. Why can a Taoist person be different from ordinary people? What is meant by entering a mountain to cultivate immortals? It is nothing more than cutting a mountain into a house, moving out the 7 emotions, 6 desires, distracting thoughts and turbidity of the ordinary master, and bringing the heaven and earth aura and the opportunity with merit and blessing. Move in. Sitting in a blue shirt like a Mongolian boy who has just read and read. Nowadays, the mountain monks in the world, whether they are in the ascending realm or the 14th realm, dare not call Zhou by name, for fear of revealing the secret of the world to the sky. Daozu smiled. This guy seems to be kept in the dark, and it is normal. How can one be recognized by the sword holder when he was young? 2 seniors also stared at him. Qin Pingon naturally broke his head and couldn't think of himself. After so many years of traveling on the road, it was not only Bing's Hus night tour but also a lantern during the day. It's just that Daozu is not in a hurry to explain the matter and asks, "You have been close to Buddhism since you were a child, and you have quite a lot of experience about the affirmation and negation, so you must know the 3 sentences?" Qin Pingon nodded. "Buddha said that the world is not a world, hence the name of the world." Daozu smiled and said, "Good words, but let's talk more about it. Let me give you an example. The truth is that the sky is empty. The example is the post station ferry, so that the listener can have a foothold. Otherwise, the expert can reason and ride a crane to Yangzhou." Qin Pingon said, "Suzy has poems, Danzhou Yunxia Qianjiang Chao. You can't hate it in every possible way, and there is nothing to do when you reach Yuan, Danzhou Yunxia Qianjiang Chao." Daozu said, "Speak again." Qin Pingon replied, Dao can be very Taoist. Dao Zhu smiled and said, no wonder Suzy gave a copybook which is more enjoyable than Lu Qi. No wonder Sun Guanzhu added blue eyes to you. When he returned to his hometown he would say that Haoran has a little Daoist in the world and he is a wonderful person. Qin Pingon was a little embarrassed. His reputation was already full of the streets before he went to Qingming World. Does this count as the fragrance of wine? Are you afraid of the deep alley? Dao Zhu asked. Have you ever thought about why your two brothers dared to catch turtles in the urn? 10,000 years ago, the three of us could not completely solve the legacy of the old heavenly court ruins. It's even more difficult. But now that the three of us are going to go out of the way, it's not as good as sparse to prevent water control. Cui Yang and Qi Jingchun are not short-sighted people. Why don't you understand? Think about it again. When the public is ascending to the sky, what is he waiting for? To make up for the lack of God's position is similar to the Qintian supervisor of our secular dynasty. There is always a carrot and a hole. Dao Zhu said with a smile. Can't show me just wait for the three of us to block the door, right? Qin Pingon shook his head and said, the juniors don't understand. Because there is something in the world, Zhou has lost all secrets. Dao Zhu raised his arm and pointed at Qin Pingon. It's you, the bird in the cage. The heavens are thorough and the earth is Qin Pingon. There is a tug of war between the hearts and minds, which ultimately determines who is more capable of becoming a brand new and stronger one. Fallen mountain? The soul belongs to the sky and the soul belongs to the earth. Of course, Zhou must have its own means, find another way, make a new look, seek a solution and will never stand still. Dao Zhu said, so Qing Tong Tianjun left a letter to you asking if you are full. Qin Pingon instantly tightened his heartstrings, clenched his fists empty, put them on his knees, took a deep breath and asked in a deep voice, Am the one? Dao Zhu smiled and said, Qi Jingchun really put a heavy burden on your shoulders early. Qin Pingon suddenly enlightened. Why would a Zhou Zi who has done his best, start targeting an orphan in Mud Bottle Alley so early? Zhou Zi's existence had long since broken through life and death and detached himself from good and evil. When he was young he went up to the mountain to collect medicine. When he was blocked by mountain torrents, Old Man Yang later taught a method of breathing in breathing. In exchange, Qin Pingon created a dry tobacco rod. Returning from the capital of the Great Sui dynasty, he presented a flying sword, named 15 by Qin Pingon. Old Man Yang's reason was that someone did not eat dumplings during the new year. With the addition of the Feijian embryo, whose original name is Xia Fengdu, on the 15th day of the first day, it means that it can dodge the first day and the 15th day. I never thought that the one who could not hide most seemed to be Qin Pingon himself. Going out for a long trip again to the Great Wall of Jianqi to send swords to Ning Yao, with invigorating charms posted on his legs and feet. Qin Pingon asked, Is that morning? Dao Ancestor shook his head and said, That would be too small to look down upon Qing Tong Tianjin's methods. You asked for this one yourself. Qin Pingon breathed a sigh of relief and asked bluntly, Dare to ask Dao Ancestor, can this matter be solved and I am still me? Dao Zhu smiled and said, I ask for more blessings. Qin Pingon was dumb. Dao Zhu was probably worried that Qin Pingon was going to go wrong. It was really a good idea, but it was spreading in the world more and more away from the original meaning, so Dao Zhu then added a word, Blessed are those who ask for themselves. Qin Pingon asked, If Li Lu or Ma Kuxuan saw those words, whose handwriting would it be? Qin Pingon has always mistakenly believed that those words were written by Li Lu or Ma Kuxuan. Dao Zhu shook his head and said, Not necessarily. What Li Lu sees may be Dong Shuijing, who seems to be collecting debts for others, or Lin Shui, who is Dao Xen Shui. What Ma Kuxuan saw may be the fire Wan Xiu, or Li Lu the of water. What Gukan sees may be Song Jisin or the finishing touch Xiao Yu. What Wan Xiu sees, it may be the handwritings of Qin Pingon or Lu Xianying in an Iping Lane. Only one thing can be certain no matter who sees it. It's not my own handwriting. Dao Zhu smiled and said, When you recognize something in your mind, you will continue to find reasons and arguments to support your understanding. Kiln workers, butchers, wokers, carpenters, woodcutters find firewood and fishermen find fish because of their skill. Each is different, so when you look at the same world, each will have its own focus. Qin Pingon frowned and asked tentatively, Those words are similar to the town of Red Candle? It's like a confluence of a long river of time. So anyone can be and no one can engrave? Daozu answered the question. The reason why Qingtong Tianjun set up this prohibition is so that you young people will not be too overworked on the road of spiritual practice in the future. Of course, they are even more worried. After being broken in the Liju cave and taking root, you will lose one. The barrier that cuts off the secrets of heaven. The younger generation travels out one after another, and they will reveal clues about that one prematurely. Regarding the direction of the long river of time, it is not a small taboo, and the cultivator has to explore it by himself. Daozu smiled and said, "Now can you answer the previous question?" Qin Pingon turned his head subconsciously and glanced at the direction of Mud Bottle Alley. Walking from the alley to the drugstore, if you have money to buy medicine, snowy weather, muddy roads, you will walk lightly and there is no money in your pocket. The same journey, even if the spring flowers bloom all the way, will make people stagger and tired. Why is it so? The state of mind dictates. Law is not alone but rises according to circumstances. Traveling through mountains and rivers, but not procrastinating, this is what Buddhism calls the mind and the trouble. What's more, his own husband also specially commented on the phrase, "The human heart is in danger, but the Taoist heart is weak." When I was young, I was asked the most about the burning of porcelain. It was nothing more than 2 words. The direction of the heart, the direction of the hand. Qin Pingon said, "You don't have to go shopping alone just to find a coin on the ground, and you don't have to wait for other houses to open the door. I don't think it is hard." Daozu smiled and asked, "Have you picked up money?" Qin Pingon said with a face, "I really picked up a few of them. In the night when helping people to grab water, a child was lying on a field ridge with Erlang's legs upturned, chewing on the roots of the grass. The star was shining above his head. The child held up a copper coin he had picked up on the ground during the day. Daozu raised his hand, pointed to his head and then pointed to his heart. A person's rationality is the accumulation of knowledge accumulated by the day after tomorrow, and the roads that we have opened up by ourselves. Our sensibility is born and sent. The heart is the official of the monarch and the gods come out. It is a pity that people are tired of things and the heart is a form of service. Therefore, practicing cultivation, saying 1,000 ways and 10,000, will not be able to get around a word of the heart. Qin Pingon, may I ask the purpose of all the techniques in the world? Qin Pingon thought about it briefly and replied, "It can be falsified and it can be corrected." Daozu asked again, "Where is the Tao?" Qin Pingon replied, "It can make people fascinated, unite with the world and everything and stay away from upside-down dreams." Dao ancestor nodded, seeming to be satisfied with Qin Pingon's answer with a look of emotion. Hundreds of flowers bloom, thousands of people are competing, the earliest human sages who changed heaven and earth, in those long years that are difficult to describe in words. Whether it's cultivating, mountain climbing or learning, it is a very beautiful time. Daozu stood up and said, "Follow me to the Mud Bottle Alley." Qin Pingon got up and walked out of the backyard with Daozu. Sudian and Lingshan in the front yard of the drugstore were completely unaware. Stepping out of the threshold, Daozu looked towards the street and said with a smile, "Qi Jingchun traveled to the Little Lotus Cave in the past. Before picking the lotus, he said to me that the purpose of practice lies in knowing, and the joy of seeking Tao lies in the unknown. Good. Guy, teach me how to practice." Qin Pingon smiled knowingly. Daozu suddenly joked, "You are not bad as a junior. You didn't practice boxing and sword in your early years, so you dare to let me give way." Qin Pingon smiled and said, "I was young and ignorant and said something offensive. Daozu, forgive me. Isn't it true? The Lord of Luopa Mountain treats people with sincerity, and he is not afraid of shadows. Then it's okay. Ask your conscience at night and talk to your heart. You can't be scared by your own shadow when you walk alone." Walking on the street together, Daozu asked casually, "What kind of knowledge are you studying recently?" For Dao ancestor, it seems that you can know everything. If you want to know, then you don't need to know. If you don't want to know, it's probably a kind of freedom. Qin Pingon replied, "I read some Taoist Fa and Futuluan. Before I came, I planned to go to the Qintianjian and borrow some books." The Saint of Rites reminded one thing in the capital, that the opportunity for the proof lies in the words. Now, are you planning to travel the Qingming world? People without thought he must worry about. Qin Pingon was worried about being careless. He was slapped to death by Yujing's second head teacher when he just showed his head in Qingming world. It's just that in the presence of Taoist ancestor, it is hard to tell the right and wrong of his direct disciple. Do you have any experience in reading? It was said in the Book of Pills that Luan is a character derived from Dao Qi, so I plan to choose more Kuelong, gluttonous and cloud seal patterns to read. Dao Zhu hummed, reading it makes people fly over. Qin Pingon was puzzled, didn't he see? Instead of reading? How to pronounce Falu pattern. Dao Zhu turned his head and smiled. Just now in the drugstore you know that you are the one, you cannot worry at the moment. It can also be explained as your own Dao heart is stable, plus the gift of Luqian Daofa. It's just why there is no fear after a little bit. You don't worry that it is due to pure divinity. And don't forget that the road of martial arts today is the old way of Shinto. Qin Pingan's eyes were bright, looking at the far side of the street, the thoughts of a 14th level monk, directly manifesting the main road, and there was a light rain on the street. Walking in it, then keep your feet on the ground, go and try. Try it. Dao Zhu smiled. He looks a lot like that stubborn fellow Qin Qingdu. No wonder he fell in love with him because of the disparity of generation. Very sword repair. Qin Pingon turned his head and looked back at the medicine shop. After that, the two of them walked towards the alley of mud bottles together, and Dao Zhu narrated some old yellow calendars that Bai Yujing would not record. Someone used to go upstream along that long river of time in order to find their true face, tracing their origins, but to no avail. Someone worked tirelessly trying to find two identical flowers between heaven and earth. For a long time. The time of a world stagnated for a long time. The Dao Fa finally couldn't support it and the world collapsed. This person finally said with a smile, Chao Wen Daoshi is dead. Someone wanders far away with the sword, opening up the world, looking for an answer. Who is there in the world and what is the sky in the world? Guess what? How do you open up the world? Qin Pingon immediately remembered the meeting of his senior brother Cui Yang at the Great Wall of Jianqi. He slapped his arm on his arm and replied, I used the technique of turning the mustard seeds upside down and walking toward the small world, asking for self-certification? Dao Zhu didn't give an answer and changed the subject. Don't teach outsiders, don't set up words. Words are not words too. So some people break the word barriers and set a millennium period chaos and a sea of divine consciousness. It's so dark. Someone wants to explore something. Before the ancient gods, there was something that created the gods. So there are people wondering again. Is the long river of time a straight line that comes and goes without a trace, or an endless circle, or is it composed of countless uncut points? Could it be an ancient god? Once created spirit beings and finally handed over to the human race to create gods in the future? Qin Pingan was silent, but it was inevitable that he was curious about whether this Taoist ancestor had ever successfully visited the border. And what did he see? What is the so-called Tao? Dao Zhu smiled and said, You almost got accepted by Lu Chen's generation master and became my close disciple. Lu Chen was obviously farther than you thought. He went to Bai Yujing, got a bird in a cage and closed the door, and he became more worthy of the name. Qin Pingon was stunned. But on Bai Yujing's side it seems that I have said more about it. Even in the presence of the most holy master, I still have to say, if you become my close disciple, wherever it takes such hard work, just mind. Bai Yujing Shinsai sits alone, practices the avenue and becomes the four masters at least 10,000 years worry-free. Listen, you, the most holy master, are really not surprising at all, and another 3-character sutra popped up. Qin Pingon pretended not to hear the 3 words in his ears. The most sacred master who never wanted to study heaven and human, is still a man of temperament. Dao ancestor seemed to be talking to the most sacred master and said with a smile, the old master rolls up his sleeves for someone to show. If I remember correctly, the saber in the early years was taken to the wild world by a proud student. Qin Pingan's mind moved slightly. Among the 72 sages of the earliest Confucian temple, 2 of them made Qin Pingon most curious, because the sages were highly knowledgeable, and it is not uncommon to be a direct disciple of the most holy master, but one is famous for earning money. The other one is not an ordinary fight. It's just that in the later history of the Confucian temple, these 2 seem to have retired early and disappeared. They did not create a context in the Hauran world, nor did they follow the saints of rites to the world, but even if they were very curious, Mr. Qin Pinganzai over there, I still didn't ask the inside story. Dao Zhu smiled and explained to Qin Pingon, if a group of fierce attacks are everywhere, there must be a victory. The Confucian temple still has some back-end. Dao Zhu suddenly asked, would you like to see me? Qin Pingon was about to decline the matter, but in an instant, it was as if he had already seen a picture of a landscape far in the sky. In the wild world, a remote place with thin and almost no spiritual energy. There are 2 adjacent huts, and there is a tall and burly man with a big beard and a right gusset. The man with a strong mountain breath is chopping wood with a hatchet. There is also a thin, tall young man full of books with his hands folded, looking at the cat named Linu on the hut. He just jumped off a tree and walked away with a cicada. It's just that this cat was left by his old friend in his early years, and he just helped to look after it. The man chopping wood asked, "How do you say?" The young man nodded and said, "The old poems have been sorted out almost, and 3,000 pieces have been prepared for a while. You can go out." The man smiled and said, 3,000 songs, so many? That level must be uneven. Fortunately, it is in the barbarian land and there are few people who know the goods. Otherwise you will not have the face to register yourself. You will lose face in the wild world. Only one. The young man smiled and said, "The only one? With Aoyang at the bottom, what am I afraid of?" The burly man laughed dumbly, put down his hatchet, clapped his hands, went to a cloak mound behind the hut, and found a broken iron sword, a high crown, a broken rope, and a Confucian shirt. The man stretched out his hand to wipe the dust off the ancient crown and put it on his head, not forgetting to retassel. Wearing a Confucian shirt and a long sword hanging from his waist, the man is still big-bearded, but his momentum is different. There was an old saying in Howren that the death of a gentleman is inevitable. The young man walked into the hut and took a long sword from the wall. There was an oil lamp on the table. Howren, someone in the world once was drunk with a lamp and watched a sword. When this young scholar holds a long sword, it is like the world's sharp edge 3 feet together. On this side of the town, the 2 sides passed by the old locust tree ruins. Dao ancestor said slowly, Guess, has the old locust wood sword box, the old sword fairy returned it to you?" Qin Pingon shook his head and said, "Can't guess." Daozu smiled and said, "I have a chance to know in the future." Qin Pingon asked, "Is the old Guanzhou nearby?" Daoist ancestor nodded and said, "I was drinking tea and melon seeds at the gate of your mountain. Before going to Luopa mountain, I was slapped with horns by Daoist Jingqing on the side of the small town. He also said that the grass on the hills of your house is lush." Qin Pingon stretched out his fingers and rubbed his eyebrows. He was really an uncle. When he walked to the small alley, Daozu stopped, looked at the small alley in front of him, smiled and said, "My first disciple, the only disciple who personally collects money, once had a fable saying that he was worried about the world. But Luchin said that he was worried about the world. Is the great wisdom, so Luchin has always been afraid of a certain saying, the so-called eternal leisure, is that the person who was dreamed of wakes up in the dream, and then the world will return at that moment." Bai Yujing also has a Taoist person thought it's very interesting. "I'm afraid that his master is like a buzzing mosquito. Even if he gets rid of thee of heaven and is discovered, it's just a slap." There is another person in Bai Yujing. On the contrary, I think one of the so-called transcendence avenues in countless heaven and earth is just an extra red dot on our arm, which breaks with a flick of his finger. Your brother Cui Huang had already thought of this. Generally speaking, it is the one of Luchin. The idea is relatively unsolvable. If you come to Bai Yujing as a guest in the future, you can talk to him in detail. Daozu said, "Just walk here." Qin Pingon made an effort. Daozu smiled and returned a Daomen chief inspector. In the next moment, Qin Pingon returned to Dali capital. After thinking about it, he went to Qin Tianjian. Inside a room of the Dali Qin Tianjian, someone was burning incense and the fairy mist curled up. An outsider who just lived in the Qin Tianjian with a young face and surnamed Yuan has helped a lot in the Taisha Bureau over the years. Because he is proficient in the latitude and longitude, moon phases, concocting techniques and secret rate, he has perfected the Qin Tianjian breath difference and fading method. It was this person who had placed a small incense burner in front of him, holding an incense chopstick and burning Gonnan incense. It was just the supervisor and deputy supervisor of the Qintian supervisor who looked at each other face to face at this moment. The 2 old monks were still very leisurely and ridiculed a few words similar to the official debts often owed to books and burning incense to read Su's words. Before Qin Pingan's shot at the inn in the capital and then Ning Yao's sword, the movements were very loud, but they were not as shocking as the vision at that moment. The deputy supervisor asked in a low voice, "Master Supervisor, this hidden official, is it a hidden ascendant sword repairman?" Jianzheng stretched out his palms, looked at the cracked ancient tortoise shell and sighed, "Your guess seems to be low." The supervisor suddenly slapped his knees with his palms, "Killing to death. It is absolutely unreasonable. Even if Qin Pingon is a Ascension Realm sword repair, the supervisor did not believe it. The Yupu realm swordsman who was in her early 40s was already shocking enough. As for that Ning Yao, what did she do? Jianjing sighed. No matter what the truth is, the situation is the current situation. The dragon is entrenched in Xiaotang, shaking his head and tail casually. For Dali capital, it is an unstoppable stormy sea. With force it's an idiot dreaming. How does it make sense? Haha, Wenxing's family lineage. The deputy supervisor said tentatively, then only moving emotions. Jianjing's mind was shaken. Qin Pingon really came. However, the old monk still looked complacent, pretending to nod suddenly and said, I must report this to your majesty immediately, and there will be a deputy labor supervision officer who will treat the guests on his behalf. I remembered that the deputy supervisor was Xianxia Academy in the early years and said no. Those who are less conscientious and express affection are the most appropriate. Apart from anything else, Qin Pingon is still a nostalgic person. You can tell him about affection and prescribe the right medicine for the case. The prisoner had a hard time saying that at the Changchun Palace I was really badly hurt by the Queen Mother Dallas pit. Before Qin Pingon watched Jingyang Mountain, he lay on a wicker chair at the Gyunla Inn and rested. To take out the piece of natal porcelain, order him to use his palm to observe the mountains and rivers, and to observe Qin Pingon from a distance. The result is good. If you use the quack and lake argument, the two sides are considered to be a bridge. Finally, the supervisor and the deputy, the two old men looked at the young monk who was always silent. Mr. Yuan? The young monk smiled and said, I have come since I can't drive away, I just watched the changes. Anyway, the worst result is that the Qin Tianjian was demolished. Anyway, Day is rich now. A Qin Tian jail for Qin Pingon at the moment is like entering no one. Glancing at the plaque, observe the timing. Seeing good and bad things from the sky, the sage chooses it. Qin Tianjian's Qi trainers observe the celestial phenomena, calculate solar terms, establish Xing Shuo and compile calendars. They need to tell the emperor those signs of rise and fall. Heaven and earth have already placed the Xiang there like a book spread out, and everyone in the world can read it casually, and the monks can read it more diligently, and all the gains may be their own way and state. The Xiang, in the sky, the Xiang, in the radicals of the human character, the cultivation of the Tao and the attainment of the Tao, is probably the purpose of one's cultivation, and ultimately it seems to be as immortal as the sky and the earth. Qin Pingon stepped into a library full of multiple landscape restrictions, and he sighed in his heart. He deserves to be the third master of Bai Yujing who is, no one can beat, no one can beat. The truth cannot be simpler. Lu Qin is like all alone. Alone in a complete world with no gaps in the avenue. Besides, all the people of the world live together in another world without hindrance, and the well water does not offend the river. I just don't know whether the sword repair of the 14th realm with one sword can cut through the barriers of the avenue. There are almost no practice secrets on the Rinyun Iyun Tower. Most of them are masterpieces handed down by the 3 religious scholars and 100 schools. That's why Qin Pingon wanted to come here to read. Because the realm is there, the book is turned extremely fast, the spiritual consciousness is slightly moved, and after reading a book in a flash, some ancient books that have made his mind move slightly, Qin Pingon takes down from the shelf and silently writes them down. Those key statements. Even the mountains are like mountains and the air comes out. Is it related to the 3 mountain talisman? The dragon is transformed into the snake and submerged in the dragon. Will there be such a fierce thing hidden by the secret technique in the wild world? All gods sweep the floor and burn incense? Is it related to ancient sacrifices? In the end, Qin Pingon took a few books, walked through the wall, put the books under his arm and stood against the railing in a blue shirt. On the other side of the square, a group of monks from the Qintian supervisors gathered. They were not very old and they had a child's comb horn bun, dressed in green clothes, and their style was simple. In addition, there are also Yudu Zhu Si Chen Shi and young girls with different clothes. A group of people are on the steps, standing or sitting, standing and sitting, but no one is lazy. After all, the Qintian supervisor still has strict rules. What they talked about the most was, of course, the arena competition between Yu Hong and Zhou Haijing. Then there are some experiences of landscapes that go out to experience, and it is not easy for Qintianjian's gas trainers to go out, so every time you travel, the journey to the landscape will not be short, and you will often walk around half of Aquarius Island, and your whereabouts are secret. Every time they travel far, there will be two groups of people secretly guarding the road, the Ministry of Penalty of the Great Li and the monks who accompanied the army from all over the country, so there is no room for mistakes. De Liqin Tianjian's qi watching technique is rare, not worse than sword repair. Qin Pingon was hesitating whether to return to the town and go to Yang's shop to read the letter, or go to the inn to find Pei Qian and Chao Sunny, or go to the ferry to meet the two nephews, or go to the palace directly. Looking at the generally carefree teenagers and girls, Qin Pingon had to sigh, lush years when the most lovely. Qin Tian supervisor is divided into astronomy department, geography department, omission department, calendar department, 5 elements department and sacrifice department. The Taisher Bureau, the Arithmetic Bureau and the Construction Bureau have recently established the Boundary Bureau, the Shandu Bureau and the Dialect Bureau. In addition, there are also some Qingshui Yamen in the Bell and Drum Academy and the Indian calendar. Among them the calendar is carved, also called Lin Tai. The newly established Boundary Bureau is responsible for managing the yellow scale albums of the dynasties for the royal family. As for the Dialect Bureau, the Izhou dialect was compiled by the Ministry of Rites, and the minister Zhao Yao specifically abbot the matter, and finally deposited it in the Qin Tianjian. This is a huge expense involving immortal money, and the Ministry of Household has not cursed his mother. Because Zhao Yu had worked as a clerk in the Ministry of Household for a few days, he described this high-ranking servant of the Ministry of Rites as a man who sold yet in spendthrift. The gangsters of the Ministry of War can't afford to provoke them. Yu Zhao Yu, an official of the Ministry of Rites, arguing and arguing don't matter and fighting can be insulting. Inside the Qintian supervisor, there is also a distinction between superior and inferior. Those who look at the sky and despise those who look down on the earth. Those who look down on the earth will only follow the steps and follow the old rituals and sacrifices. The priests look down on those who guard the omissions. The aloof calendar department, the Ling Tai Lang who was born in Lin Tai and studied the calendar, has the most precious status and no one looks down on it. Qin Pingon looked around. That one, the bird in the cage. Qin Pingon quietly raised his right hand and touched his left wrist. Long travel and return travel, time flies, spring goes and autumn comes, thinking and thinking, white horses pass the gap, walk around and watch flowers. What really made Qin Pingon hesitate the most was another trip by himself. Are you rushing to that battlefield or fucking straight to Tuyue Mountain? Qin Pingon turned his head and because he didn't intentionally hide his trace he came to the door. It is Deputy Ma Jian and an outsider named Yuan Tianfeng in Qin Tianjian. Yuan Tianfeng saw this young hidden official at close range, and he was full of emotion in his heart. Is it really a legendary 14th realm great monk? Qin Pingon clasped his fists and smiled. Luopashen Qin Pingon has met Ma Jianqing, Mr. Yuan. It is inappropriate to call the deputy supervisor. However, Qin Pingon put more thoughts on the young monk who was fresh. Regarding the Jingqing Qintian supervisor, Cui Dongshan specifically mentioned this unnamed Mr. Yuan in the Dali dynasty. He gave a very high evaluation. Refreshing, cheerful, full of spirit and amazing. In the words of Pei Qian when he was a child, it was to let the big white goose boast good people, that is, cistern Wanshu sleeps in, the sun comes out from the west and the dog vomits ivory. Deputy Ma Jian responded, I have seen Mr. Qin. About Mo is to imply that Qin Pingon is not a hermit now, and when he returns to his hometown he is a scholar in the line of Wenxing. Yuan Tianfeng called Qin Pingon as Qin Shanju. Deputy Ma Jian glanced at the books under Qin Ping's arm, but didn't say anything. A good one comes uninvited, takes without telling and leaves without saying goodbye. Fortunately those few books are not too expensive. Besides, among the rare books collected in the Qin Tianjian, there are 2 flavors and charms condensed by cultural movement, which are dedicated to helping pass on. What's more, the banned books that were really secreted by the Qintian prison are not kept in the library. Even if it was him, the deputy supervisor, who wanted to check, he had to nod and agree to the other 2. Any book he turned over would be recorded. With Qin Ping's current realm and Taoism that seems to fall from the sky, it is actually not difficult to find traces of the formation. Even taking a book and going back and forth, it is destined to be unknown. Yuan Tianfeng smiled and asked, Lord Qin Shan, do you believe me? Qin Pingon nodded and smiled without hesitation. Of course I believe. Yuan Tianfeng suddenly painted a circle with a whisk in his hand, and then used the whisk to split it in the middle. So? Qin Pingon shook his head, raised his hand and put his fingers together. It was also drawing a circle, but it was not fully connected, and then it seemed to deviate slightly except that the line did not extend. Yuan Tianfeng nodded. The vice supervisor on the side stroked his beard and smiled. As for whether I understand or not, you two can guess. Qin Pingon asked in his heart. Mr. Yuan is studying how to deal with the Wuxian demon? Yuan Tianfeng did not deny the matter but said helplessly, it is as difficult as climbing the sky to fight against the sea. Yuan Tianfeng seemed to be a little bit late and didn't ask until this moment. Master Qin Shan has heard of me? Qin Pingon nodded and said, Senior brother values Mr. Yuan very much. Yuan Tianfeng didn't care too much but asked, Master Qin is proficient in arithmetic? Qin Pingon smiled and said, the more I look at it, the more headaches I get, but it's not bad to use it for luminescence. Yuan Tianfeng regretfully said, in fact there is one way to do it. It should be included in the Dali Imperial examination. The proportion is not small. I heard that Cui Guosher had this intention, but unfortunately it was not implemented in the end. Qin Pingon hesitated to speak but stopped. Yuan Tianfeng was puzzled. Does Qin Shanju have objections? Or do you agree with me? Qin Pingon hurriedly waved his hand and smiled. Although I can't decide on the imperial examination, I am definitely afraid to nod this head. Pulling out a book and tapping his head, Qin Pingon said, if I really want to be included in the imperial examination, I will definitely not be the only one who has a headache. It is even conceivable that the whole world of scholars scratching their heads and screaming at these arithmetic books. Yuan Tianfeng laughed. This closed disciple of Wensheng's line is still very funny. Deputy Ma Jian sighed, okay outsiders, you can talk and laugh here. Qin Pingon left and his body disappeared in a flash. Yuan Tianfeng smiled and said, don't ask when to return the book? Deputy Ma Jian smiled and didn't say anything. Qin Pingon appeared in the alley and found that Lu Lao was not there, so he chatted with Zhao Duanming for a few words, only to realize that Master Lu had stopped an old master before. On the side of Long Yao in the small town, a middle-aged monk chanted silently like a spring breeze. In the wild world, several sword repairmen who traveled together. The man in the middle wearing a lotus crown said, go to Tua Mountain. Sword of Coming Chapter 855. In the wild world, for sword lights are like rainbows, cutting through the sky. Wherever the sword lights reach, the sea of clouds is broken everywhere. Qin Pingon wears a lotus crown on his head, a green silk robe and a knight's sword. Ning Yao is wearing a golden robe and carrying a sword box. Qi Tingji and Lu Zhiyujian travel far. Lu Qin condensed his consciousness into a figure the size of a mustard seed, and took a petal of the lotus crown as a dojo. Sitting in it as if feeling a bit boring on the way, he jumped up and punched a set of punches. Qi Tingji laughed in his heart. The hidden official seems to be taking care of our sword's speed, otherwise it can be faster. The current Qin Pingon can be described as one of the best in the world, like a flat boat under the long river of time, and the other three sword repairers need to wait on the water. Lu Ji was a little absent-minded, curled her lips. She was busy looking at the sword hidden in the sword box, each with inscriptions. The small sword box, it is probably a piece of white jade Jing treasure, with the magical power of the mustard seed Nasami, making there are 8 long swords in the box, small and pocket-sized like flying swords. The names of the swords are Qiushui Yuma, Deliberate, Qiaoqiu, Nanming, Easy Blade, Centipede and Mountainwood. The 8 ancient swords are full of sword spirit and they all contain the true meaning of the Tao. It is no wonder that the third head of Bai Yujing took out this thing from the city head before with a painful look on his face. It is probably the heirloom of Lu Chen's own Tao lineage. Lu Shen walked fancily, screaming almost like a martial arts style, and asked curiously, Mr. Lu, the boss sword fairy didn't help you arrange a retreat? Logically speaking, with Qin Kingda's temperament that he is most unwilling to owe debts, Lu Ji, an outstanding female sword repairer from a foreign country, will certainly treat him very favorably. Looking at the sword box, Lu Ji said to Lu Shenqing, I did find me and wanted me to go to Xinshao City to practice swords, but didn't agree. Otherwise, the boss sword fairy will say hello to the Confucian temple, and when the Battle of Nan Pasua is over, Lu Ji can rush to the Qingming world. Qin Qingdu actually persuaded Lu Ji twice, once to tell her not to give up, 2 deliberately to pursue the refining of the second natal flying sword Beidou, first entered the Ascension realm. For the second time I hope that Lu Ji will travel to the Qingming world. For example, to find an anonymous guest in Baiyujing, he will first refining 2 natal flying swords with peace of mind, breaking the realm and refining the sword correctly, and so on. Circumstances: if you feel that Baiyujing's practice is boring and there are too many rules, go to Daxuan Duguan to ask Sun Huaizhong for help, and find a Taoist status casually. Zhou Xian said, Mr. Liu has not been able to break through the boundary for a long time. It is a pity that the boss Xianxian's suggestion is very good. When I arrived at Baiyujing, I and Brother Yu would definitely not restrain Mr. Liu. Why not agree? Lu Ji gave a very Lu Ji answer, too lazy to run that far. At first he didn't want the boss Xian to deal with the Confucian temple for himself. Besides, in the world under the blue sky, who is not familiar with the place of life, she has no shame to borrow money from others. In the Great Wall of Sword Qi, Lu Ji is a poor ghost who has never had spare money. As a great sword immortal, his salary and all the rewards for killing monsters on the battlefield are used to fill the bottomless pit of Feijian Beidu refining. Lu Xian heard her statement. Not only was it not unexpected, but took it for granted. He took another look at Lu Ji and couldn't help but look at her a few more times. He made up his mind to see if there was a chance to dig a wall in the future. Lu Ji really spent too much time and energy on the matter of sharpening the second natal flying sword Beidu. Although she is a great family, she just seems to have no feelings for her hometown and the world, and she never talks about it. As a result, many young sword repairmen at the Great Wall of Sword Qi always felt that Lu Ji was a local sword repairman. In fact, Lu Ji's natal flying sword, which had never appeared in the Great Wall of Sword Qi, was born in the hands of Nando, and Beidu was born to death. He also had a natural relationship with the Qingming world. After all, there is the Jade King group who really gathers Beidu. Statement. The 16 sword repairmen who traveled to the Qingming world with the Hanging Mountain back then were led by Yuaning Old Sword Repair Qingquan. If Lu Ji is willing to nod his head, by the way, it would be good to have a response to the other 15 sword fairy embryos. It's just that Lu Ji didn't nod, so Qin Qing gave up. With a woman who did not hesitate to exchange her life for the engraving on the head of the city, the future of the road is limitless. It seems useless. Even Lu Chen heard a gossip. Brother Yudo once privately let the big disciple who was upside down the mountain pass a message to Lu Ji and invited her to Baiyujing to be the lord of the first floor. It's a pity that I ate a closed door at Lu Ji's side, and the female champion from the knife room failed to meet Lu Ji in the end. Qin Pingon suddenly said, Lu Ji, you can actually put a name in the South China city where Lu Ji teaches you, and you can be a guest of honor. From now on, you will be half of your family, just like distant relatives who don't often stop by. Baiyujing's 5th city on the 12th floor, 3 master teachers each with 1 city, and the 2nd city on the 12th floor, either affiliated to the 3rd master or self-supporting Dao vein. For example, the Verdant city is the land of Taoism of the Great Master, and the Nanhua city is a 3 square meter land of Lu Xian. Qi Tingji echoed, I have no opinion. Since they are all half of their own family, then Lu Ji doesn't need to return the sword box. Ning Yao nodded and said, it's a good thing. Lu Xian categorically cut the railway line. Mr. Liu is willing to condescend to be the guest of South China City, and he is welcome by the poor, but his brothers clearly settle the accounts. It is not difficult to borrow some of them. This joint trip has passed more than 100 dynasties, sects, and immortal forces in the wild world, but Qin Pingan's performance is only 2 words, restraint. Most of them looked down and took Ning Yao and the others in a glance without stopping. With a heart the ancient well does not wave. Qin Pingan said, on the penultimate page of the Book of Pills, the 3 mountain talisman is recorded, but according to the book's records, in addition to the number of uses, this talisman seems to have a crucial limitation and Master Lu can solve it. Well, Lu Chen smiled and said, it's not difficult to decipher, it's a bit costly, of course you have to use a Baiyujing secret method as an extradition. Back then the brothers preached for all Taoist officials in the Jade Emperor city, and Mr. Sanshan Jiuho hid it. After listening to it for 3 days and 2 nights, I was seen by my brother, and I consulted Mr. Sanshan Jiuho about some talismanic knowledge. At that time the poor Tao was watching the excitement. Later the senior brother created the Sanshan talisman. It's all in the eyes. This symbol is based on the technique of visualization to create 3 fairy crossings that resemble a mountain city, just like opening 3 doors between heaven and earth, located on the bank of the long river of time, forming a pattern of interdependence between mountains and waters. But according to the commentary of True Relics, the monks need to have walked through the 3 mountains by themselves. Otherwise, this three-mountain talisman is too unreasonable. It will be a life-saving talisman that any upper 5-level cultivator dreams of. Of course, it can also be used to kill people and make money. Qin Pingon gave Lu Ji and Qi Tingji a general explanation of the use of the Xianxia talisman. In addition to being the most suitable for traveling far away, this talisman has a greater magical effect, but it is also a kind of nourishing soul. Holding a talisman to travel far away, the only requirement is to train a qimon or a pure martial artist, and must withstand the rush of time. 3 times are the best. Once you abuse this talisman, it will attract the invisible victory of the world's mountain luck. Then, if you go out in the future, it is best to go around the mountain, otherwise once you get close to the mountain, there will be inexplicable disasters. For a gas trainer, this is naturally a move that does not pay for the gain. The world is not a mountain or a water, let alone a mountain is not a mountain. Lu Ji was surprised. There is such a good thing under the sky? Training a gas man to nourish the soul, the higher the level, the more difficult it is to get immediate results. Qin Pingon smiled and said, "Unfortunately, you have to use up 3 opportunities in one breath today." Lu Xian asked, "Is there an idea for the visualization of the 9 mountains?" Qin Pingon nodded and said, "I have seen a lot of wild hills during the discussion in the Summer Palace and the later Confucian Temple." Above the earth, another sect head force passed by, hurriedly opening several landscape formations like a big enemy. Even if the 4 sword lights flashed by, they were already thousands of miles away in an instant, and the mountain guard of the sect still dared not to withdraw for a long time. Qin Pingon hesitated for a moment. Jiao Zhang only needs to give out 2 Xianxia talisman for now. The last 3 hills need to be chosen carefully and then be careful. In fact, from the moment he walked out of the Yang family drugstore, Qin Pingon began to plan this matter, but it was a pity that Dao Zhu stopped when he reached the nipping alley. At that moment, Qin Pingon had just figured out the 8 hills beyond Tuyue Mountain. When it comes to covering the heavens, what could be better than staying with Dao Zhu? Daoist's move must have a profound meaning. It is very likely that it is the last 3 mountain talisman that Qin Pingon has in mind, and the route has gone wrong. Lu Xian is relieved if each person has 3 mountain symbols, 9 hills. The 4 sword repairmen would need 36 rare runes in total. He, by Yujing's poorest city lord, couldn't make up so many Zhangjiangzhen green urns. Ning Yao said, "I have a few pieces of talisman. The talisman paper can be made at will. It doesn't have to be the kind of true green and green urn." Lu Chen categorically said, "How can this be done? It is the most destructive thing to favor this kind of activity. The poor Dao has to beat the swollen face to fill the fat man once. Even if the green urn is not enough, I must tear the book." Looking at Lu Chen's expense, Qin Pingon did not expose the careful thoughts of the 3-hand master. Ning Yao's use of this talisman meant that he had forged a small bond with South China City. This kind of incense relationship with the world's first person, let the green urn be precious. It is a bargain business. In the night boat, Wu Shuangjiang gave a few green urns. In Haoran and Qingming, if there is a Bai Yujing 3-made Taoist who succeeds in becoming a heavenly monarch, they will burn this talisman and welcome their respected Bai Yujing palm. "Teach patriarch," Lu Ji said. "My few copies don't make do. How are they worth?" Qi Tingji said slightly, "I and Chief Lu can use the same paper." In the end, Lu Chen really took out all his belongings and found out more than 20 green urns. In addition, he also took out a book of Huang Tingjing lingering in purple and yellow. Lu Chen finally got up and pinched at the Lotus Dojo. Dao Ju, after reading some words, carefully tore off a few pages of the book as talisman paper, but the person who really started to draw the talisman still borrowed Qin Pingon, who is a Taoist. Lu Chen now only has his thoughts left. Lu Chen tentatively said, "Because none of us have ever walked through the 6 hills personally, so I need to separate my mind, enter your heart lake for a moment, and perform a Baiyujing secret evangelism method to help transform the false and the true, and use the false and the true." Lu Chen paused for a moment and asked with a smile, "Have you ever trusted the poor way? Of course, you can cut out a site with Jianxin in advance as a place for hospitality. Besides, the real guest is actually Qin Pingon. Attach to the tail and go." As a result, all 3 of Ning Yao looked at Qin Pingon. Qin Pingon nodded and the matter was settled. It was clear that none of the 3 of them believed in Lu Chen, but Qin Pingon's decision simultaneously understands. Qin Pingon instantly mastered the Baiyujing immortal art, and at the same time he split his mind to go to the heart lake of the three people in Ningyao to help shape the outline of the 6 mountain cities. The three people's hearts are full of swords and spirits, leaving only one place to keep the rest of the scene tightly isolated. Lu Chen is very disciplined, but just a glimpse of it makes him slap his tongue, especially Na Ningyao, with a little deduction, knowing that her mind-to-heart world is a whole colorful world. After leaving Sangsanhu, Chen Pingon reminded, in each mountain city, you can stay at most for 1 stick of incense. This matter must be paid attention to and cannot be taken lightly. Then Chen Pingon smiled and asked, are there any taboos about respecting incense? As the old saying goes, it's easy to ask the gods to send them to the gods. The Sanshan talisman needs to return gifts and send the holy. Qi Tingji smiled and said, I have long admired Mr. Sanshan Jiuho, there is nothing to taboo. Lu Ji said, what's the matter here? Just burn a few incense sticks. Does not spend her money anyway. Lu Shen muttered, Mr. Sanshan Jiuho, no matter how good you are, you will have fun. Qin Pingon, Ningyao, Qi Tingji, Lu Ji burn incense to pay respect to the same person at the same time. Lu Shen asked, is there any mountain incense? He is really scared of this hidden official at the moment. It is a pitfall to pit people. Fortunately, Qin Pingon smiled and twisted out a bamboo incense tube from his sleeve. He still took a few pei qian to visit the Hebo temple, and the temple gave gifts. A handful of mountain incense was distributed to the 3 of Ningyao, but when he handed it to Lu Ji, he smiled and said, according to the rules, please ask for the money, you have to pay it yourself. Qi Tingji threw Qin Pingon and Lu Ji each with a grain of rain money. Lu Ji flicked his finger and the grain of rain money fell into Qin Pin's sleeve. Qin Pingon took the lead in traveling far away with Fu. In the first mountain city he twisted out 3 sticks of incense and lit the incense. Because he was left-handed, he held the incense in his right hand and held it in his left hand and held it high above his head. Lu Shen tutade, it's very sincere to let you give up this little trick. After finishing the incense, Qin Pingon smiled and said, since you are sincere, you still have to believe. Ning and Yao were slower than Qin Pingon, and Qin Pingon stood there and waited for a while. Qin Pingon asked, I heard that the city Master Guo from the Baiyu Jingyu hub created a big amulet called Shijian? Since the relationship between Master Lu and Qingzhu Guo is so good, they have opened Guangqianjianzhai there. Presumably, Lu Shen said bitterly, such a large talisman, one of a handful, is not comparable to a talisman paper like King Gulf. Wuxia, the lord of Yushu city, and Zhou Xian, the deputy lord, are all well-deserved Taoist old swordsmen. In the words of Dao Chang, son of the great Xuandu Guan, there are 2 people in Baiyujing who understand swordsmanship. Of course, Yudo counts 1 and Guijia plus Zhao Xiang counts 1. Jade Hub has a sword-washing thing, and it is an ancient star with a great history. The sword-washing talisman is a big talisman that evolved during the process of tempering the flying sword. Lu Shen asked tentatively, still borrowed, right? Sure enough, if you talk too much you will lose. I would not mention Guangqianjianzhai if I knew it. Qin Pingon said, don't be nervous, let's buy them. If there are a few cards on Master Lu, we will buy a few. Lu Shen heaved a sigh of relief, only 3. In the end, Qi Tingji spent money to buy 3 Yushu City washing sword talisman, and all of them were given to Lu Ji so that she could hurry up refining and fortify the flying sword and Beidou Jianfeng. Lu Ji wanted to be polite with others. He held his mind and said to Qin Pingon, thank you. A sword box, 3 mountain charms and sword washing charms. You have to add the Ascended Realm Great Demon who crossed the sea to hunt down that alias border. If it was not necessary to join forces with Qin Chunan at that time, once Lu Ji fought his life and sacrificed his flying sword and Beidou, he might be able to engrave on the city. Qin Pingon smiled and shook his head. Lu Shenxin feels sad, your kid is generous. I remember the boy in Mud Bottle Alley before. Not like that, it's more simple. Qin Ping Enna's figure dissipated and went to the next mountain city, and after burning incense to pay homage, this time without waiting for the 3 of Ning and Yao, he went straight to the 3rd mountain city. Lu Shen asked, why don't you visualize the Tuyue mountain for the last 3 mountain talisman? Qin Pingon said, even if it is already a boat that is not tied to it, you need to be careful to sail the boat for 10,000 years. Lu Shen agreed, it makes sense and it is a good sign. The 3rd head teacher of Baiyujing suddenly smiled and said, Qin Pingon, don't forget, any unintentional remarks you have at the moment are very important. Qin Pingon ignored him, just looking at the foreground. This mountain city is a hill with a stalemate, with bones and corpses piled up, black clouds are rolling and the mountains are full of bones. The world seems to be only black and white. This sect in the wild world, at the gate of the mountain, learn from the awe-inspiring fairy mansion. An archway building stands with the plaque White Flower City. The doorkeeper was two corpses who were supposed to be sword repairers, and their deaths were miserable. One of them was pierced through the heart orifice by a long sword and firmly nailed to the stone pillar of the archway. A person knelt on the ground, leaned forward, leaned his sword on the ground. The hilt of the sword passed through the chin and penetrated the head. Are two ancestors of the Great Wall of Xianxia. Qin Ping and walked to a corpse, squatted down, pulled out the rusty long sword, put it in his sleeve, raised his palm and swiped it gently on the side of his head. A corpse suddenly dispersed like smoke and dust, and Qin Pingon took out an empty hip flask and put it in it. Then got up and walked to the other kneeling corpse. He lifted the ancestor to his body as if to help it, and then gave it a slight shock and put it in another empty hip flask and then took the sword into the sleeve. The sword repair of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, and there are very few people who do not like to drink. After doing all these things, Qin Pingon moved his sleeves with both hands. A fairy cultivator of the monster race arrived in the wind, and fell on the steps of the mountain gate. His face was uncertain. Who is here? Leave your real name. Almost at the same time, a sect, more than 100 monks of the monster race appeared one after another, flocking to the mountain gate. Qin Pingon said indifferently, "The Great Wall of Sword Qi, the hidden official Qin Pingon." The fairyland was stunned at first and then burst into laughter. The laughter was like thunder and the bones fell in the mountains like clouds. "Where is the lunatic? What are you kidding?" A consecrated monk reminded him in his heart. "Sect master, this kid really looks like that hermit." It was just that soon a monk laughed and said, "Could it be the hermit of the Great Wall of Sword Qi who couldn't get along in the Howren world and ended up becoming a Taoist priest?" As a result, behind the sword-backed man wearing a Taoist crown, 3 more people appeared almost simultaneously. A handsome young man smiled and said, "What did you talk about, so funny?" Qin Pingon joked, "I said I knew old sword Immortal Qi from the Great Wall of Sword Qi. This guy killed him and didn't believe me." The native sword repairs of the Great Wall of Sword Qi are no strangers to the Yayan Mandarin of the wild world. Almost everyone knows several kinds. Especially the sword repairer who needed to travel long distances frequently like Choumiao. Qi Tingji nodded and said, "Then beat it to death and see if you believe it or not." Qi Tingji has only one natal flying sword named Bingjie. When he was young he used to have a nickname and let him go. Like to help soldiers on the road. Qi Tingji Lu Ji Ning Yao. The sect master of the fairyland didn't say a word. He ran away first, and then there was a noisy bird and beast dispersal. Lu Ji narrowed his eyes and said, "I'll leave after I've enjoyed it here. I promise I won't use half incense." Qi Tingji said, "I am targeting those fish that slip through the net." Qin Pingon nodded. "As long as you are within a half-scented incense, you won't delay business." After using the Sanshan talisman, this trip went to Tuyue Mountain, which greatly reduced the distance and saved a lot of time. Qin Pingon left first and Ning Yao followed. The next mountain city is adjacent to the ruins of an ancient battlefield. This place is dark all year round, with overbearing ghosts and gatherings of ghosts and demons. There are hundreds of thousands of Yin soldiers. Ghost Valley similar to the Bone Beach of Luzhou in Beiju. It's just that there is no suppression by the Faima sect. There are ruins of battlefields in the world, the suppression of Confucian academies, the land and water dojos set up by the vassal states of the major dynasties, and the experience of descending the mountain and the accumulation of merits by the genealogists, so there is very little climate. The wild world is not the case. Ning Yao said that he would play a sword here. Qin Pingon continued to travel to the next mountain city with the Fu. Any Ascension Realm swordsman who has no worries, once completely let go of his hands and feet to perform swordsmanship, the killing power can only be described in 4 words, which is unreasonable. Sure enough, within less than half of the incense, a wild sect completely broke the incense. Lu Ji stopped at the top of the mountain with a sword, calling his name directly, "Qi Tingji, I hope that the Dragon Elephant Sword sect and Luapa Mountain will be able to help each other in the future. Otherwise one day there will be a dispute between the 2 sides, I might help outsiders." Qi Tingji joked, "Chief Lu, there is a suspicion of turning his elbow outside." Lu Ji is not the kind of person who can hide his words. Dong Sanging, Xianxia, and you, if you can choose, I will definitely not follow you and become the founder of some sect in the Hauran world. Because of the sword repairs of the 3 city heads, you are the most ambitious and the sword heart is the least pure. Since the first day I arrived at the Great Wall of Sword Qi, I am not willing to approach you. On the surface I am kind to everyone. Actually, I am unfamiliar with anyone. I believe you have seen this a long time ago. Qi Tingji nodded. I finally waited for these truthful words. If Lu Ji keeps silent and never voluntarily tells the matter, Qi Tingji does not think it is a good thing. People are in disagreement with each other and there is a slight gap like a mountain and a river insurmountable. Aoyang once said that the words of the world are all bridges. This is true. Since I have said it, it doesn't matter whether it will hurt people or not. Lu Ji said straightforwardly, people don't serve themselves and they are talking about people like you. Qi Tingji hesitated to speak but stopped laughing. Lu Ji frowned and said, wrong? Qi Tingji explained, the word way in this sentence should actually be pronounced twice, not to go. It is a real secret of practice. It warns future generations to cultivate morality, know oneself and seek truth. Among the engraved sword immortals, in fact except for Dong Sanging, Qi Tingji and Xianxia, they only said that their knowledge is more than enough to be a Confucian master in the world. As for sword repairs like Sun Jiyuan, just pick up an elegant and refined Qinglu celebrity. Lu Ji turned his head and said, but you have changed a lot when you reached the Hauran world. Qi Tingji smiled and said, be the suzerain of the founding faction. A mountain towering into the clouds. In ancient times there are vast clouds and waters. Where do you know what? This place is like the fairyland in the book. It is full of aura and thick with flowing air and flowing water. Is an extremely famous mountain in the wild world. In the barren world there are also big dynasties, 5 mountains and even a great dynasty. Human race monks multiply and thrive, bustling human race, ghosts, mountain spirits and water descendants are mixed. Qin Pingon did not go to the Daoist temple on the top of the mountain. He stood there and asked, can you figure out which monsters are stationed at Tuiyue Mountain? Lu Xun smiled and said, difficult. I can only say that the great pioneer disciple of the great ancestor of the wild will definitely be there. As for the new makeup of the Taoist name, it is more likely that he ran to talk to a Liang. Qin Pingon was silent. Lu Xun asked, still worried that the unexplained prophet our group will be trapped in a mountain city? Or in a similar situation? Qin Pingon nodded. Lu Xun wondered, what are you doing here? Qin Pingon looked up, just come here to take a look. Returning his gaze, Qin Pingon said, I intend to give the authentic alchemy book to the Huangting Mountain of Taiping Mountain. Lu Xun knew from a single point, the material of the book itself is good. With more than 1,200 words, it is all refined. It can indeed support a Luotian Dajiao and use it as a mountain guard. It is just a gift from the seniors. What are you telling me about this? Besides, you don't lack this thing in the Luopa Mountain. What about the next sect? Taiping Mountain will definitely rebuild the sect in Tongyi's Hao. After all, this book was given to me by Brother Li, so you turn around and say hello to me. If it is feasible, I will do it. Tongyi's Hao Taiping Mountain's Taoist incense belongs to the family of Bai Yujing de Zhangjiao. Well, it really hasn't changed at all. He's still a good fortune boy. Okay, it's a small matter, it's on my body. In fact, with the temper of a big brother, you don't need to ask this. Qin Pingan's eyebrows were soft. Even if you are a close person, you still have to have the etiquette you should have. Lu Xun laughed. The big brother is still great no matter where he goes, he is so popular. Lu Xun couldn't help but sighed. There is no place in life, but my hometown is nowhere. Everything in the world has its own belongings. We are all just pawnshop buddies. Qin Pingon said, let's go. The next mountain city is the Xianxia ferry crossing in the land of the great dynasty Jiangyi. Qin Pingan's outfit is not too eye-catching. Qin Pingon said, come here to borrow a sword. The formation of the Taiping Mountain sword formation has been there for a long time, but there has been a lack of suitable long swords. Otherwise, based on Cui Dongshan's estimation, take a trip to the Hate Sword Mountain in Luzhou, Beiju, and purchase a complete set of sword imitations of acceptable rank. The sword requires about 800 grains of rain money. And the premise is that Heng Jianshan is willing to dig out half of the family, and he must come up with so many imitation swords. And the capital formation of this dynasty is a sword formation that completely abandons defense and only takes attack. Lu Xun was relieved and lent the sword box to Lu Ji, lending the Dragon Elephant Sword sect, there is still some possibility of getting it back. Lending to Luopa Mountain is not what meat buns and dogs are. Xian smiled and said, borrow? Otherwise. Qin Pingon was puzzled. You didn't talk about it before. It's not difficult to borrow if you borrow or repay. They only need to go to Luopa Mountain to ask for it in the future, and I will definitely return it. Xian asked, do you do it now? Qin Pingon lost consciousness for a moment with both hands sleeved. The gatekeeper Jing Dafeng. First she guarded the gate of the town and then guarded the gate of Luopa Mountain. This is the so-called providence in the dark? Qin Pingon hesitated for a moment and said, I once met someone on a mountain top. Xian sighed. Don't doubt it, he is the first ancestor of the military strategist with inconsistent merits and demerits. Fu Lu Street Li. Verdant City, also known as Jade Imperial City, Jade Emperor plums are really crisp. Confucian Li Shixing Taoist Zhou Li. So who is the third person? Xian asked. Qin Pingon, you have been pursuing incorrect. Then have you ever thought about who can be infallible? Are you really a monk who has reached the sky every step of the way? Qin Pingon shook his head and said, it's a god. The old blind man and Qin Qinglu stood together by the cliff, one squatting and the other sitting, each drinking. 100,000 mountains is a large piece of land that the old blind man abruptly cut from the wild world. Qin Qinglu asked. The great ancestor of Tuyue Mountain is only a little short of being able to enter the 15th realm. Except for the Battle of Tuyue Mountain that year, the three of Qin Qingdu injured the root of the avenue. There is a lack of these mountains. Doesn't matter. The old blind man raised his dry fingers and scratched his face. There's a fart. You can't fight me hard? Qin Qinglu smiled and said, desperately? Even if I win you, I won't be able to enter the 15th realm without spending a lot of time. The old blind man smiled hoarsely. That's right. Qin Qinglu asked, that is to make way for Zhou Mi? The old blind man thought for a while. That's not enough, I guess it's the same as me. The aptitude for cultivation is not good, and the 15th realm is hard to ask for. Qin Qinglu raised his head and glanced at the sky. The old blind man said, there is nothing to see. The sky is hanging by the galaxy. Bone and thin the wood-like old man, wearing a purple robe, painted with black and white yin and yang patterns. The wine gourd hung on the waist is shining brightly, but the magnificent atmosphere that seems to gather a whole galaxy in the sky is much inferior compared to the peak period. There is an uninvited guest who can save the thoughts of the void and concentrate on the truth. It is as if the immortal rides on the chase, fights to the stars and crosses the Tianhe. The 18 heavenly beings of ancient and modern times cannot bypass the astrology. The young man glanced at Fulu Yuxuan, his face indifferent, and said, glorious and congratulatory. Yu Xian grinned and grinned. Saving Bai Yi, he almost did not help, and he was too guilty to see people afterwards. I never thought that the Holy Master would come here to practice and own a piece of destiny, and I feel even more guilty. It is said that when the Confucian temple was discussing matters, there was no shame when the old man chatted with the great master Long Hushan and the real person Huolong. Yu Xian took out a pot of Qingshan wine from his sleeve and raised it high. Come on, a pot? The youth shook his head. Yu Xian took a sip of his drink and asked curiously, why do you, a respectable old man like you, mix with the affairs of Lizhu Dongtian? Refers to the burning of natal porcelain in Nalong Kiln. And this young and virtuous man was once the lord of the earth immortals, and he has the reputation of being the ancestor of all laws. One of the places where this person cultivated is called Laoshan. It is said to be located in the center of the sea. The gods can't move, the immortals are really unattainable and far away from the world. There are monuments, platforms and streams on the mountain, the inscription Tai Ping Huan Yu Zhan Jinan. There is a deep stream under the refining stage called Mo Qianjian. And that deep stream of water is the only standard money that has passed through several worlds before the three fairy money, Shaoshu money and Guyu money, which is the predecessor of gold fine copper money for later generations. The intention of this move was originally to completely divide and disperse the divinity, but later there was a lot of mistakes. After more than 1,000 years of continuous replacement, gathering and collection, it was converted to use the current three kinds of fairy money. The young man said, Qingtong Tianjun is my good friend. If you can ask for anything, please help. Yu Xian drank wine without commenting on these past events. Mr. Sanshan Jiuho among his disciples, there is Qing Jun who is located in Fangzhou Mountain. The status of the 3 mountains in the past was even higher than that of the 5 sacred mountains including Zhou Xian. One of the key points of the attempt by the Saint of Rites that year was to invite this gentleman out of the mountain to formulate etiquette rules together. There are also 2 anonymous disciples, Taoist Wang Min from the same era as Bai Yi and Jianxiu Luyu. Both of them are not well known when they are up and down the mountain in the world. All deeds are only circulated on the top of Haoren. One Fengqi went to sea to visit the Immortals, and the other Luyu rising and falling like a comet flying across the sky. This young man spent some time in the Lizhu cave in his early years. Fulu Street? Fulu Street. And that Jianxiu, an anonymous disciple, was born in Fulu Street. As for the peach blossoms in Taoyuxiang, he planted it himself. Of course he did it casually. Dali Dynasty's casting of gold, fine and copper coins was still the carving mother he gave. After the Lizhu cave fell to the ground, the Fulu Street Lu family, who was inextricably linked with the Lu dynasty, once secretly presented a few pages of ancient books to the then Queen Dali. One of the pages recorded a talisman, which seems to be of low rank and not very useful. At that time, Nan Yen was on the side of Ni Ping Alley and he used to learn now and personally performed the wall penetration technique. From Song Jisun's house to Qin Pin Gan's ancestral home. The heaven and the earth are connected, the mountain walls are connected, soft as an apricot blossom and thin as a page. I point a sword, open the door quickly and follow the law of Mr. Sanshan Jiuho. It's just that even the Queen Nanpin or the later Empress Mother Lu Jiang had never heard of the names of Sanshan and Jiuho, let alone know the routes of the Great Road. It is a pity that Nanzan failed to find out the truth after returning to the capital, so that for so many years she has not paid attention to this matter. If this talisman falls into the hands of people who know the goods, it will be Jinshan on the page alone. Treasure. Yu Xian sighed with emotion. A man and a god, riding across the galaxy and riding the sun and the moon, swimming beyond the 3 mountains for seas and 5 mountains, life and death remain the same. The young man shook his head and said, 10,000 years ago the gods were still the masters of this world. It's easy to cross the galaxy and you don't need to ride the sun and the moon. Yu Xian turned his head and looked into the distance. That guy, are you staring at the 2 of us now? The young man did not follow Fu Lu Yuxuan's sight. Instead he looked at the mountains and rivers of the wild world and said, it seems that he is not only planning to move mountains. A golden arch bridge. Even if a monk at the top of the ascending realm stands in it, there is no end in sight. Climb to the sky, of course, occupy the main position of the ancient Tianting ruins. Vulcan returned to his position and his status was side by side. There was no difference between the 2 sides and they were equal. Was Hen the new armored person? In the early years the 3 sword repairmen who slashed Tueshan with their swords, Qin Kingdis natal flying sword Duckweed, was completely broken in Tueshan, and then the Great Wall of Hedao Jianqi was born. Long Jun's natal flying sword is named Daxu Xianzhong. As for the predecessor of Liz Hen, Jianxiu observes his life flying sword and is named Time Changhe. Newly promoted water god Rain 4. The master of the throne of the demon Fei Fei. Water Li Lu was stripped of the Dao deity by Ruan Xiu. She threw it to Yuxi casually. When he reached the sky, Zhoumi carried several blessed places with him. As for the cave sky in the wild world, it is meaningless here and will only be a burden. Those beings in the blessed land are not only the source of incense in the world, but also the source of candidates for many gods. The original sword repair was brilliant, but in fact, it was the best candidate to replace the sword bearer, which was the best candidate to replace the sword bearer. The priesthood was lower than the 5th highest of the ancient heavenly court, but higher than the 12th highest. After all, the sword bearer is still alive. But the piece of Tai-Bai immortal sword presented by also selected Qin Pingon, Lu Kai Zhaoyu, and the last one who was obviously a demon monk, is simply an unreasonable hand that Beta Shengjing Juzhong can't play. Will definitely not be the arrangement of the Zhongtu Confucian temple. This is Haoren's invisible suppression of Jiaxing. Zhoumi had no choice but to retreat, leaving Firen in the wild world and becoming the co-master of the world in one fell swoop. Not brilliant, so I had to choose beach. In addition, the dozens of sword repairmen who were brought here by Zhoumi were all Tueshan 100 sword immortals. They were also the reincarnations of the gods that Tueshan planned for 2,000 years. They were similar to Yuxi and Tantan, although they were all occupied. There are different degrees of divine insufficiency in a seat of God, but these are just trivial matters. and they are all within careful calculations with very small errors. The biggest surprise was that Zhou discovered that his pure divinity was indeed not lacking, even 10% higher than expected. The crux of the problem is that Zhou only got nearly half of that one. The problem is this. The species is nearly half, infinitely close, but this difference is a world of difference. And even if Zhou used his backhand, but that one would rise with the tide, making Zhou still unable to pass halfway. Even if the current Zhou is already most of the realm of the celestial co-masters of the past years, it still has not been able to piece together a complete one. Makes him have to delay his return to the world. Therefore, the existence with the most complete divinity at the moment becomes the fire who is on the throne. The ancestors of the three teachings must continue to unite. After half of the time, the three worlds will be Taoized, and the speed of Taoization will become faster and faster. Either it is. I can only go out. In addition, many relatively young mountain monks nowadays do not know a secret matter. The first ancestor of the military family had a 10,000-year agreement with the ancestor of the Xianxia. Before returning to the world, Zhou did not know why, allowing a small group of newly promoted high-ranking gods to retain part of their humanity. For example, Zhou Xian and the three old friends of the Jiaxian account, Wuxia and Tan. In that battle that swept the two worlds, if a high-ranking fell on the battlefield, it would be a return home from a long-distance wandering for thousands of years. It was a kind of return, but it would lose varying degrees of pure divinity. The vastness of the old heaven is beyond the imagination of any mountain monk. Any high ranking is like a territory that occupies several worlds, but compared to his hometown, it looks deadly silent. I only talked about the distance between the four heavenly gates. It is possible that any cultivator of the Jade Purity realm can only swim from one gate to another in his entire life. In the narrow sense, the old Tianting site is like a capital of the human dynasty. Zhou Xian, Wuxia and Beach. Today the three people met at one end of the Golden Arch Bridge and walked slowly. Unanimously, each exhibited a blindfold more like people. Relying on the retained humanity to be an individual, that kind of weird feeling, is probably a veritable involuntary. Once immortal, like the word freedom becomes one of the most meaningless words. Tan murmured, while I can still feel regret. Yes, four expressions are indifferent. It's not easy to pretend to be an individual. From now on, you can easily manifest a new world and then separate a bit of divinity. That self is definitely more free than before and you can make mistakes. Tan was full of anger, gritted his teeth and said, that self, or is it still himself? This one is not still looking at that one coldly. Is it silly to overlook 100 years, 1,000 years or 10,000 years? What's the matter? Significance? When divinity completely covers human nature, there is no more joy, anger, sorrow and joy. For these gods, they seem to have countless freedoms and countless possibilities, but the only unfreedom is not allowing themselves to be gods and not allowing themselves to destroy themselves. Li Jin seemed to be the most indifferent one. He hugged the back of his head with his hands and smiled and said, I really miss the years in the Great Wall of Jianqi. I have already copied it all the way down anyway and I can often chat with Master Hermit. Zhou Xian continued, according to what Qin Qingdu and Long Jun said in their early years, if you become one of the 5 highest in the name, it seems that you can break the shackles a bit and you don't need to be as boring as we are now. Tan's eyes lit up. Suddenly, the heavens and the earth brightened up, and a woman without the slightest emotion rang out abruptly, just a few of you trash? Shui Xinyu almost suffocated in an instant. Humanity was squeezed to the size of a dust, and he had to show a pair of golden eyes. His golden body was as big as a star. Tan is also in a similar situation, but the avenue suppression is not as exaggerated as you see is now enduring. The distance is relatively better and it can keep the body as it is. Li Zhen's hippie smiled and said, see you, this is a once-in-lifetime opportunity to provoke a few words to our girl Ruan and maybe be beaten to death. At any rate, she can get a moment of relief and then she will be put together again by Zhou God, known as the Sleepless. Careful, intentionally or unintentionally, let them maintain a little humanity just like a sleepy person in the world, but they have become insomniacs. But as long as all the residual humanity is wiped out and the divine nature is eaten up completely, naturally there will be no such pain. The so-called gods are like a chessboard and every square has an emotion. Lift accurately, put back accurately. The higher the position, the bigger the chessboard, the more squares. The problem is that every single or multiple emotional ups and downs, overlaps, and blends are not aimless and unable to do whatever one wants, because they are orderly and always have a clear purpose. Moreover, the total number of black and white pawns is always in an absolute position of half and half. If we say that human nature is a natural prison given to the human race by the gods, such absolute and pure freedom is a bigger cage. And this is just the view of the human race. The gods do not know it, or to be precise, the gods will never know it. Finally, whether it is a human or a god, freedom seems to be a cage. A person who is not a sage can have no fault. Knowing wrong can improve the great yen. Will make mistakes but can also correct them, which is a kind of freedom. There is no better word that can comfort people's hearts more than this. A woman who no longer has a ponytail stands on the railing in the center of the Golden Arch Bridge. With a wave of her hand, she dragged the towering golden water Wuxia into a round of sun, and killed it with fire. A 14th level cultivator Wuxia facing her existence, there was no way to fight back. Zhou Xian appeared here but did not stop her wanton action anyway. The divinity of the water is still here, there is no trace of omission. He will have a big deal to put it together again. Looking down on the railing carefully, overlooking several worlds, smiled and said, "Who would have thought that I would miss that one just a few steps away from the city? Unfortunately, I couldn't become that one. Nowadays, many places can't be touched by careful sight. But she who is standing on the railing has no restrictions on this road, because all the sunlight can reach is the territory under her jurisdiction." She never said a word. A pair of golden eyes, long golden hair and a golden robe. Zhou Xian knew that after reaching the sky she looked all over the world but did not look at that person alone. Sword of Coming Chapter 856. On the top of Zhongmen Mountain in the barren hinterland, there were two human sword repairers standing. Within less than half of the incense sticks, a white flower city with bones and forests has become a page-turned almanac, and as the years go by, it will become an old almanac that no one cares about. Under Qi Tingji's edict, 4,000-foot-tall golden-armored gods stood in all directions on the border of Baihua City, forming a formation like a block to prevent the big fish from slipping away. In addition, there are various visions. Among the thundering white clouds and the moon-born blue waves, hundreds of magnificent golden thunders and lightnings fall into the world. Like the gods of the thunder department whipping the earth wantonly, the mountains and rivers are fragmented, the earth is arched, and those are hidden in the caves. The monsters in the Tao found out one by one. There were still dozens of ink dragons swaying in the air, swallowing the monks of the Imperial Wind Monster clan, chewing them, and the sound was like a string of firecrackers. Don't forget that sword cultivation is also a Qi trainer. In addition to the flying sword, there will also be a lot of strange refining and middle refining. These are all Qi Tingji's freely spreading handwriting. Aside from the sword repair identity and the fate of flying sword, Qi Tingji can completely be regarded as a powerful ascending monk. In any world, the monks possessing such magical methods can be regarded as talents of ancient and modern times. However, in the Great Wall of Jianqi, Qi Tingji is regarded as uncertain by the old sword fairy. The skills are fancy, flashy and pure distance. The two words go farther and farther. In short, half a sentence is not good. This is when Qin Qingdu is in a good mood. He will rarely teach others a few words. More often, Qin Qing didn't bother to say a word, and the higher the level of Jianxiu, the less he liked chatting. However, some children went to the city to play in groups, passing by the thatched hut, and maybe they could have a few words with the old sword fairy. Once there was a child who put a paper kite and fell on the thatched roof. How dare he ask for it with the old sword fairy, let alone climb up to the hut? He went home in grief, and only when he arrived at the door he found his father and mother full of joy. He stood there and waited. The father had the paper kite in his hand that looked like he was running home with long legs. When the child asked, he realized that it was thrown back by the old sword fairy. From childhood to adolescence, this trivial matter was the biggest talk. Later, when the child became a sword repairman, the young man did not wait to become the old man, and it was like a broken paper kite, and his life was a trivial matter. On the battlefield, Lu Ji previously took out the two most recognizable long swords from the sword box, Qiu Shui Chao Chao. She held the sword in both hands, matched her natal flying sword to hold Pu, and bladed a jade pure monster monk. It was the command of the Patriarch Hall of the White Flower City. During the previous fight, Lu Ji spent a little energy. In addition, there were a handful of unslashed cultivators of the Earth Immortal. As for the monks of the demonic race under the Earth Immortal, I can't remember and don't need it to remember. The monster monk who was cut by the long sword Qiu Shui, within those life orifice acupoints that accumulated spiritual energy, suddenly burst like a flood, flooding a large area of Qi Palace, which is not reasonable. If it is cut by Qiaoqiu, the world, mountains and rivers within the monster clan's body will also suffer sin. Qiaoqiu's natural sword intent, in cooperation with Lu Ji's mighty sword aura, is like a feng shui master who is proficient in finding dragons and acupuncture points. Sword Qi rushed into the formation like an iron cavalry, and as soon as it stirred, all the mountains fell apart. Lu Ji took the flying sword and held Pu, returning to his or her body to warm up. As for the other Beidou, he was refining his sword with a washing talisman. A natal flying sword, Bao Pu, possesses 2 natal magic powers, one of which is a magical power. The flying sword can imprison the monk's shadow and instantly hurt the Yin god. The reflection of the Yin god is like a piece of black nailed by the flying sword. Cloth, the monk can only tear his own Yin god. At the same time, as long as the cultivator is reluctant to bear a Yin and is not decisive enough, he must immediately face the flying sword. The supernatural powers can severely damage the outer body of the Yang god with the pure sword intent, but whether it is the Yin god or the Yin god, it involves the foundation of a monk, and the flying sword's supernatural power is like an embrace and it is like a shadow on the battlefield. Therefore, on the previous battlefield of a sect, Lu Ji twisted his wrist. The sword Qiu Shui shook out the sword flower. The sword light was as bright as Qiu Hong, shining in all directions, and the monk's reflection appeared. Qi Tingji said sternly, "It's not for no reason that the old sword fairy asked you to go to Bai Yujing to practice swords. It is not just that the second Beidou is in agreement with Bai Yujing Avenue. I guess Fijian's Baopu has a chance to have the first. There are 3 kinds of magical powers. Besides, you are not the same as Xianxia and I. We almost stopped like this in the development of the cave. It is difficult to make progress in succession. The small world of yours is not the case. Too many possibilities." Lu Ji was absent-minded when she heard it. Of course, it wasn't that she couldn't tell a good friend she was really not interested. Her cold temperament is not only innate, but also has the influence of refining 2 natal flying swords, which makes her not an ordinary pure heart and low desire. Lu Ji's thoughts at the moment are still on the hidden sword in the sword box. The other 6 Taoist magic swords, which are wandering and deliberately inside, have some kind of superior secret techniques. Lu Ji feels that if they can return alive privately. Let's find Qin Pingon below and make a discussion. In the future, the 3rd master Bai Yujing will go to the Dragon Elephant Sword sect to collect debts. It will be easy to handle. Return the sword? The sword that the hermit borrowed from you. Why did you ask me, Lu Ji? When Qi Tingji saw that Lu Ji turned a deaf ear, he did not persuade him. After all, she was a lady who couldn't persuade the old sword fairy. Lu Ji's small world is like clearly covering thousands of miles, but there are only a few houses. Saying that she has money is really rich, as if she is sitting on 10,000 acres of fertile land. Saying that she has no money, but it's not fake and it's really talkative. Only a pitiful 1/3 of an acre land is planted for the autumn harvest. Because Lu Ji had only a handful of 3 zombies in addition to 2 natal flying swords, which was a shabby number for any upper 5-level Qi practitioner. All 3 things were used by Lu Ji to assist her cultivation, to help the world to absorb the spiritual energy faster, and to nourish the 3 souls and 7 souls. Her attack was still the only 2 natal flying swords. A cultivator is as small as the world and the mountains and rivers are vast. What really belongs to you is to absorb the spiritual energy of the world as a source of water and irrigate the mountains and rivers in the earth. It is a majestic city with more cities. It is a country. The monk is like the king of a country, and in the end, proving the Tao, is like becoming the co-lord of the world. It's just that for every individual who is a Qi practitioner, for the excavation of the caves of the small world of the human body and the construction of the alchemy, the monks are limited by their qualifications and each has a bottleneck. At most, the realm is high and there is no shortage of gods and money. The material is treasured, and it began to replace the old destiny regardless of loss. Therefore, every ascendant realm pinnacle had to start pursuing that illusory 14 realm. A great monk like Qi Tingji, immortal money, spiritual energy and magic weapons are all at your fingertips. But it's a pity that all the objects in the world have become veritable external objects. If greed is not enough, it becomes a burden. If you increase it by 1 point, it will be too late. Qi Tingji smiled and said, "It hasn't reached half of the incense. If you don't rush to the next mountain city, you can chat a few words." There was an extra broken dark blue robe in his hand. It was the relic of the Immortal sect master. His name was Qing Tong. He was a half-celestial soldier. He needed to spend some money to repair it. Lu Ji's sword was too ruthless. This green pupil robe should be recorded in the Summer Palace, because the cultivators of Baihua City have often visited the battlefield of the Great Wall of Xianxia in history. The Immortal Realm, the lord of a sect, slipped the fastest today. Qi Tingji still blocked his way and forced his union on the road, but the opponent used a natural escape method. But the ancient was cut. Can he stay? It's hard to say the next Yupu stage. In addition, there are several demon pill of the demon clan, one in the Jade Pu realm and several earth immortals, all of which were stripped from the corpses by Qi Tingji. Palms were empty and slowly rotated. Qi Tingji was supposed to enjoy the scenery. For any Jianxiu who can be called a sword fairy in the Great Wall of Jianxi, who is not a character who walked out of the Sea of Shishan, how many are normal people? Lu Ji glanced at the demon pills with a sad expression. I remember that in the early years, there was a female sword repairer who recorded military exploits. She was not good at fighting in the Golden Core realm. She didn't know her name, but she only knew that she was a gentle woman with a good appearance, but she didn't know her. Why, I have never been married and my appearance is not as good as Zhou Cheng's last year. Of course she must be much more beautiful than Lu Ji. This woman, whose name Lu Ji doesn't even know, would be responsible for recording, investigating and documenting military exploits with others every time after the war. When she saw those female sword repairers who had left the battlefield, she would laugh. Good looking. Lu Ji even had a very vague memory of the woman's face, but her smiling face seemed to be unforgettable even if she wanted to deliberately forget it. A golden core female sword repairer and not good at fighting, but in the end she chose to rush to the battlefield. Between death and alive, she did not choose the latter. She followed Fei Xingcheng to a foreign land but went to the city with Yu Jian. Probably because she feels that since the Great Wall of Sword Qi is destined to be unstoppable, and there is no hometown in the world, she doesn't need her to record the exploits. Not a big thing, not a big woman. Lu Ji has never been so hard to let go of his friend Zhou Cheng's departure. It is simply a baffling thing. But it seemed that until this moment, when Lu Ji remembered this woman whose sword aura was extraordinary, and when she thought that she was gone, Lu Ji realized that the Great Wall of Sword aura really disappeared. Lu Ji was a little irritable, looking around with a cold face. There was no monster to kill. Damn, it would be nice if he could chop it again from the beginning. As for the master of that jade unpredictable demon pill, his figure is precarious at this moment, standing tremblingly beside this engraved old sword immortal. The poor 3 souls and 7 souls are all shrouded in a cage with fierce sword aura. Suffering, I was worried at this moment, worried that the Qi Shanglu of the Great Wall of Jianxi would repent and break the contract, so I just sent it on the road again. It turned out to be Qi Tingji who was in charge of catching the fish that slipped through the net. In addition to using the magic method to arrange the formation, he also traveled far away from his body. On the way he grabbed a evasive Bai Huiqing enshrined. It is the soul of Yupu who is currently detained. Jing promised to keep it alive and asked it about the location of several secret vaults in Baihua City, and then let it lead the way to search for it without its courtesy how to open the layers of mountain and water restrictions. Qi Tingji directly opened the way with sword energy all the way. The forces of the Immortal Mansion with the general sect prefix often cunning the 3 caves of the rabbit, and will distribute the secret books, immortal money and magic weapons to various places. Of course this is limited to general, such as Houran Tianxiaofulu Yushuan Longhushan Tianshi Mansion, and Zheng Zongshang's Baidi City. Naturally they are not particular about this. Since the appointment with Qin Pingon for a half of incense, Qi Tingji did not continue to search, digging 3 feet of the ground. This kind of activity or the hidden official is better. However, Qi Tingji still didn't waste any visible things. Those broken magic weapons were cut to the ground by Lu Ji. There were many varieties. Although the treasures on the mountain were broken, the price was different from the previous ones, but they were not so valuable. Worthless. There are also many monster cultivators who have been beheaded to reveal their true corpses, as well as some white bone corpses in the form of heroic spirits, all of which are put in the sleeves of Qi Tingji. Not long after the founding of the Dragon Elephant Sword sect, money was needed everywhere. I never thought that I would pass by the White Flower City today and I would put together a small amount of money, and get a very considerable amount of fairy money. The cultivator of the Yupu realm whose soul was detained, courageously asked in a soft voice, "Old Sword Immortal Qi, are you the one who counts? Would you like to take care of the predecessors?" Qi Tingji smiled and said nothing. Even if you are a cow or a horse, Longquan Jinzong only accepts sword repairs. Seeing that the old sword immortal didn't say a word, it suddenly felt ashamed and trembled. It doesn't matter if you don't count, can you please? Qi Tingji smiled and said, have you ever been to the Great Wall of Jianqi in your life? It was ecstatic in its heart and immediately replied, I have never been there. You can swear to the sky I have never been an enemy of Jianxiu. The journey is far away, the realm is low. How dare to go to the Great Wall of Jianqi to find its own way? Qi Tingji nodded. Then get a good baby in the next life and see the scenery over there. With a wave of his sleeves, his soul was wiped out. Nowadays, many monks on the top of the mountain in Haoran may all know the existence of the Yinjian Immortal Spectrum, but before the Yinjiangxian imprint, the Great Wall of Sword Qi was actually the first edition of the crudely carved 100-sword Immortal Spectrum. Qi Tingji had read it in his spare time, but he was not interested in buying those seals secretly. In the eyes of the old sword fairy, the hermit's knife skills were really scribbled, and he had not yet really entered the room. He was among the gold and stone members, but there was a side note on the seal. The printed text makes Qi Tingji feel pretty good. There is no resort in the shape of mountains and rivers, but it is the highest city on earth. Lu Ji said, you made a lot of money this time? The group of them showed up at the gate here and things were rushed so that the fairy clan had no time to go to the treasury first. They said it was a man who made money and died for food. But when life is hanging by a thread, there is still nothing to do. Hesitating, the cultivator, whether it is a genealogist or a mountain cultivator, understands this simple truth. A on the mountain who died in a pile of money is the most embarrassed. It's really a lot of mess together. It's not too much to say that you have made a lot of money. After all, it is the foundation of the sect. Even if you open up the 3 sword washing talismans, you are still very profitable. Qi Tingji smiled and said, the gamblers at the Great Wall of Sword Qi said earlier that they would go to the bank with a hidden official. It is hard to lose money and you can make money lying down. Lu Ji reminded, Qin Pingon is a careful accounting manager. Qi Tingji nodded and said, let's look back and count the harvests of Baihua City in the lower reaches of Li Baihua City. Let the hidden officials account for 40%. Unexpectedly, Lu Ji said, 40%? He didn't contribute much. It's interesting to divide his achievements into 2. Qi Tingji said with satisfaction, finally it looks like a chief worshipper. Lu Ji said, the robe is not bad, it's mine. I can give it to Wu Manyan, the little girl. Qi Tingji took out the green pupil robe from his sleeve and threw it to Lu Ji. Lu Ji took the hand, shook his robe lightly and said in surprise, sitting on the ground and sharing the spoils is like an addiction. Qi Tingji nodded and said, I just found out. Lu Ji curled his lips. Before at the Great Wall of Jianqi, Jianxiu didn't have this habit. Is it a stinking problem for hermits? After that, the two came to a mountain city under the Sanshanfu. Ning Yao had already left this ancient battlefield ruins. It seemed that after handing over his sword he ignored the remaining sword energy, so that the battlefield ruins at this moment were still full of swords. Wanton strangling the ghosts of the Yin soldiers that were scattered everywhere. After Qi Tingji respected Xianxia, he chuckled softly, it's hard to imagine if there are no restrictions how we can behave in the ascendant realm in this world. The existence of the patriarch of the 3 religions, the vast river of time, seems to have 3 people sitting off Jinlu Loktingjiang. These 3 people don't need to say what to do, their existence itself is a great shock. Even in this barren world known for its chaotic world, there is still Tuyue Mountain. Otherwise, Zhu Wei, the old ancestor of moving the mountain, will join hands with the former co-lord of Fuyue. If you can get an old throne again, the big demon is enough to travel the world. It is estimated that in the end, there will be less than 2014 level and ascending level peak demon. They will divide the world, temporarily stop and then continue to fight until the end, leaving only the last one. A handful of 14 realms. Qi Tingji took out a banner, threw it into the middle of the ancient battlefield, and stood up suddenly as if opening a door, and quickly gathered tens of thousands of Yin soldiers from all directions, which seemed to have received a decree, like a piece of gold. The retreating army rushed into the flags frantically. Moreover, the banner itself between the sky and the blessed land is a Samla dojo suitable for ghosts to practice, but some of the fairy heroes and ghosts who originally segregated the ruins naturally do not want to be sent under the fence and lose their freedom. One by one concealed their energy trying to hide. As a result, Qi Tingji picked out one of his life. After the sacrifice, a golden bamboo whip with the true meaning of thunder method fell near the flag, and the bamboo whip took root when it fell. A few blinks of an eye on the ancient battlefield, like there appeared a golden bamboo forest with a radius of hundreds of miles, and the whole earth was intertwined with lightning and lightning. Moreover, the bamboo forest passed through the bamboo whips that spread out from under the earth. The golden light flickered, all golden bamboo shoots, pumping out the soil very quickly and continued to change. Trees of brand new bamboos are formed, the bamboo forests are shining with golden light, and the leaves of the bamboos contain the rhyme of thunder method, so that a thunder pond is opened under the earth bamboo forest. Whether it is the avenue thunder method or the bamboo whip material itself, both of them inherently restrain ghosts. In the end, only 4 roads leading to the flags were left at the site, and there was no way for ghosts to go. Lu Ji glanced at the hoisting flag in the distance and said in doubt, "You still have this?" Qi Tingji explained with a smile. "In the past, on the battlefield of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, we would be targeted every time we handed the sword. Of course we couldn't be leisurely let me use these fancy tricks. In short, there are so many magic spells, not as good as a flash of sword light. Swordsman on the mountain, if he is proficient in those side sects other than kendo, he will be suspected of doing nothing, just like a scholar who is good at breaking iron and wood." Lu Ji had nothing to do for a while, so he took out the other 2 swords from the sword box. The centipede was actually a rare relic of a Baiyujing ascended monk. Could be used as a robe similar to that of the soldier Juan. The monk seemed to know himself without a teacher, mastering 2 of Baiyujing's extremely superior secret techniques, 1 offense and 1 defense. However, Lu Ji felt extremely awkward and threw the sword back into the sword box. On the contrary, that Nan Ming, holding a sword in his hand, can create an extra weird formation. Lu Ji found himself standing in the middle of a large water in Tianqi. It seemed to be a few steps away from Qi Tingji. Thousands of miles away, it is suitable to deal with those heavy treasures that are pressing at the bottom of the box. Of course, it can also be used to deal with the flying sword of the enemy sword repair. As for the handyman, it was also Kit Kat. Lu Ji was holding a long sword, and there was a phantom creature in the form of a ichthyosaur beside him. This big blue fish was floating around Lu Ji in the air. Lu Ji thought it was pleasing to the eye, so he didn't withdraw this easy sword. And after holding Nan Ming with both hands, Lu Ji quickly became surprised. It turned out that the cyan swimming fish beside her was able to draw from the water in the Tianqi that was originally an illusory thing under her feet. Real water transportation strengthens itself. Lu Ji said, "Lu Chen's Taoism is a bit interesting." Qi Tingji said helplessly, "Somehow they are the 3rd master of Baiyujing." Lu Ji said, "There is no way Lu Chen stays by Chen Pingon like just a shop assistant who just runs errands, and it is difficult for me to link him to a 14th level monk." Qi Tingji laughed blithely. Lu Ji stopped chatting, taking advantage of the time when there was still a little bit of incense, began to refine the sword, to be precise, refine the sword-washing amulet of Yushu City. It is worthy of being Zhang Ming's great talisman that moves the Qingming world. The threshold for painting talisman is extremely high, and outsiders refining it quickly. If Lu Ji used the 3 priceless sword-washing charms to sharpen the edge of the flying sword Beidou, the effect would be remarkable. Lu Ji estimated that the sharpness of the flying sword could be increased by 10%. The sword-washing amulet allowed Lu Ji to save at least nearly 111 years of cultivating time. This elusive time is not the 60 years of non-stop circulation, but refers to the time of a sword repairman, dedicated to cultivating the Tao and concentrating on the sword practice and practicing Qi. The so-called decades and hundreds of years of Taoism are all about holding your breath, breathing out, sitting in retreat, and bit by bit of the spirit that is polished out. This is the 1-year-old of the Qi practitioner, the true age. Otherwise, it is that this kind of false years wasted time. Therefore 10% is a lot of real heart. A journey of refining the flying sword is half 90 miles. Especially for the Beidou of Lu Ji. Even if the distance is perfect, it is only a tiny bit away. It is difficult to make a sword and soar. The realm great demon, but once she crossed that threshold, then Lu Ji's flying sword killing power, even in the 10,000-year history of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, was among the best. As long as the rank of Feijin Beidou is refined to a flawless transformation, if she succeeds in entering the Ascension realm in the future, this means that if outsiders want to kill Lu Ji, two Ascension Realm cultivators must join forces and meet again. Two lives. Qi Tingji is very clear about one thing. In his early years, the elder Xian did not expect him and Xianxia to enter the 14th realm. He was very optimistic about Lu Ji, who was unable to break the bottleneck of the fairyland. There are also melancholy seedlings who later went to the Summer Palace. As for Ning Yao, what to expect, no need in the eyes of the boss Xian, it is a certainty. Lu Ji raised his head and said for no reason, in fact if you leave aside the right and wrong that one is great. She was talking about the well-known savage Wen Hai and the old fox. Admire to admire of course, does not delay Lu Ji on the battlefield. If he can hack Zhou me to death he will definitely be hacked to death. Qi Tingji said, Lu Ji, the reason why I wanted to break my oath and rush to the fifth world was because I was lucky. I tried to grab the world's first person by virtue of the great fortune. The stones of other mountains can attack Jade and help me break the big bottleneck. Because I hope to tell the boss Xian the fact that Qin Qing has misunderstood Qi Tingji. Lu Ji is not good at talking to people. In fact, Qi Tingji doesn't like talking to people even more. Today's words are truly unprecedented. Lu Ji opened her eyes and she never said intriguing words. Boss Sword Immortal is no longer there, so why are you stunned with him? Besides, even if the boss Sword Immortal is alive, you have seen you in the 14th realm in the colorful world. You will only be more disappointed and even look down on Qi Tingji. Qi Tingji was a little sad. I hope there is another chance to be disappointed by him. Today's young sword repairman in Feixingcheng has a very different attitude towards the departure of the old sword fairy from that of the old people like Qi Tingji. Qi Tingji suddenly smiled and said, in the future Feixingcheng, chatting on the wine table, no matter whether it is praise or curse, we can't get around our official Chenin anyway. Thinking of this makes people unhappy. Lu Ji persuaded, they are all the suzerain and they are more energetic. Qi Tingji sighed, I advise you not to persuade people in the future. Lu Ji smiled and said, I am the person who listens to persuasion the most. A wild mountain in front of him is named Qingshan. The first three mountain charms held by the four sword repairmen, the three mountain city fairy, were Baihua City, the ancient battlefield site, and Diwa Qingshan. After Ning Yao burned incense at the foot of the mountain with Mr. Jiuho in Sanshan, he did not rush to the next mountain city, but climbed up the steps along the incense-burning shrine. The position of this mountain is aloof, and it is one of the few famous mountains in the wild world. It is the mountain with the number of hands as an exception. As for the name Qingshan, it is unique. The colorful statue enshrined in the main hall of the Shanjun shrine with golden ripples, walked out an old man holding a string of wooden rosary beads, like the one who eats the house and recites the Buddha. He was born old and clumsy with wild crane bones like an old pine on Jianbian. This monarch of Daoist Mountain, the Taoist name Biwu, is born with a vision, has multiple pupils and colorful eyes, and has a pair of woven straw and cloud shoes on his feet. Sensing that sword aura, Shanjun Biwu hurriedly went out to entertain guests, looked at the woman Jianxiu and said in shock, Ning Yao. Ning Yao nodded, it's okay, I'll just stroll around. Biwu thought for the first time, is it true that the Haoran world has already reached the gate of his mountain? And he laughs at himself, how can he advance so fast, and if he can't even keep the green hills? It means that at least half of the barren world belongs to Zhongtu Temple of Literature. Biwu clasped his fist and said, Mountain Biwu, I have seen Immortal Ning Jian. Seeing this ascending monarch, especially the rosary in his hand, Ning Yao knew why Qingshan was safe and sound. After thinking about it, Ning Yao only vaguely remembered Baiwa's Taoist name and realm, a treasure of the Immortal family with a kind of immortal military rank. The train was switched on, and it was rumored that the mysterious place of the car driving was the seal-engraved Leihua General. Then there is this mountain monarch who built a pious and honest Buddha, and built a Wunshu monastery similar to the family temple. More it is not clear. Presumably Qin Pingon would treasure this. Hearing the kind words of Ning Yao, Biwu smiled bitterly, not worrying about his own situation. In his own territory, even facing an ascending realm swordsman, he is not completely defeated, no matter how small the chance of winning is. Life is safe. After weighing it up, there has never been any entanglement between my own hilltop and the Great Wall of Jianqi. It's just that Ning Yao can't come here alone, right? Biwu asked tentatively. Did the hidden official ever walk with Ning Jianxian? Ning Yao was silent. Biwu hesitated for a moment, still shut up, swallowed some of the slightly suspicious words back to his stomach with interest. The Great Wall of Sword Qi and the Wild World have been enemies of life and death for thousands of years. When the two sides met, if they needed anything different, they would just slash them when they saw it without reason. Ning Yao climbed a mountain for a while and asked, "Shan Jun knows him?" Bi Wu, who was accompanying along the way, smiled and said, "How can a person who has lived in the mountains for a long time recognize the hermit of the Great Wall of Sword Qi? It's just that there was a friend a few years ago who was born in Daoist Shui, who made a special trip to visit the Zhou Xian mountain site. In the scenery, occasionally I saw the hidden official standing on the edge of the cliff and copied a picture. After my friend returned to his hometown, he passed by here and gave me the picture." Ning Yao said, "He just came here but you didn't find it." Bi Wu didn't feel that Ning Yao was bluffing. He couldn't help but sighed. Unexpectedly, the hidden official Dao Fa is also so acquainted with mystery. It really is a real person without showing his face. Ning Yao reminded, "Just as if we haven't been here." Bi Wu nodded and understood. "There is nothing wrong in the mountains today, just watch the clouds and flowers bloom and fall." Finding that Ning Yao seemed to be leaving, Shan Jun, Bi Wu asked tentatively, "Ning Jianxian doesn't take a look at the picture scroll?" When Ning Yao traveled far away with Fu, he said in doubt, "The big living people don't look at them but what they do with the scroll." Shan Jun Bi Wu was speechless for a while. It was confirmed that Ning Yao had traveled far. Bi Wu shrank the mountains and rivers one step further, and went to an elegant and quiet house. The two young women's mountain ghosts were dressed in goose yellow, green and green. They made a fortune with the mountain monarch and opened the door. Bi Wu crossed the threshold and there was a scroll on the bookcase. After spreading it out, I saw the figure painted on the scroll was the last hermit of the Great Wall of Jianqi. Wearing a bright red robe, the man stood on the edge of the city's head cliff, his face blurred, his hands were sleeved and a narrow knife under his arm overlooking the earth. The Jade City of the Moor dynasty has been established for more than 1,200 years, but the emperor's surname has been changed several times. Anyway, the name of the country does not change and whoever sits on the dragon chair is not particular about it here. In the wild world, any dynasty under the mountain with a country of more than 1,000 years is definitely more difficult to provoke than the mountain sect of the same age. The capital of this dynasty is no different from the Patriarch Hall on the mountain. But at this moment, in one of the highest buildings of the palace, in the corridor under the eaves of the top floor, there was a stranger who entered without authorization. The man in the green shady robes, clenched fists with one hand, and with the other hand, is like walking in his courtyard. At this moment I stopped and looked up. A string of bells hung under the eaves. Inside each bell there were two tiny daggers with very small spacing. When a slight breeze blew, they knocked. According to the records of the Summer Palace, the emperor in the city missed the battle due to many years of retreat and gave Tueshan a large sum of money. Moreover, the relationship between the Yunwen dynasty and the two big monsters of the old throne, Huang Yuan and the Lord of the Lotus Nunnery, is not bad. Otherwise, with a fairyland, the Yunwen dynasty really cannot be guaranteed. Fortunately, even if Huang Yuan and the Lord of the Lotus Nunnery are dead, it seems that the emperor just broke through and became a newly promoted ascended realm great monk. A burly man wearing a dragon robe appeared in the corridor out of thin air and said solemnly, "The distinguished guests are here and there are misses to greet them. It's just that the Daoists don't say hello. I am also ready to prepare a banquet to meet the Daoists. Wash the dust." There is a slender woman next to him with gold powder on her cheeks and a waist knife. She is actually a real martial artist from the 10 realms. Her eyebrows are naturally connected, and her ears are extremely long and thin, which is the so-called face of heaven and human in ancient books. Qin Pingon smiled and said, "You don't have to think about how to treat guests. It's not a hassle at all. Just lend me that set of sword formations." The emperor of the Moor dynasty alias Yi Bao has 2 Dao names. He used to be Po. After reaching the ascendant realm, he took himself a more domineering one, calling himself unique. As for the female martial artist next to Yi Bao, named by Ren, she is an extremely famous female martial artist. Now she is more than 100 years old and has a skillful appearance. She has reached the end in her 50s. The Jade City has opened a defensive formation of the capital, imitating the Glaze realm. The capital is like falling into a stagnant stream of time, and it is full of colorful colors. All the monks in the city have chosen to stay in place and dare not act rashly. Once the cultivators of the upper 5 realms are not easy to walk, this is the current sign of the enemy who dares to make a mistake. Yi Bao naturally recognized the identity of the other party, but told himself intuitively that it might be better to pretend not to know. As for why a sword repairman in the Yupu realm at the head of the city turned into a Daoist man who started in the ascending realm, Yi Bao was not curious. In the wild world, on roads, all the processes are vain. Just ask. As a result, the pursuit of spiritual practice is nothing more than a superficial truth. How you live, the longer you live, the better. Once you have a conflict with others or dislike someone on the side of the road, how others die, the faster you die. It is good. Yi Bao heard the other party's big joke. The hidden officer is well known, very good at chatting, and even more interesting than the rumors. The woman twitched the corner of her mouth and reached out to touch the handle of the knife on her waist. This woman, Wufu, with hot eyes, stared at the man who had changed his attire, and knew how she would not recognize the portrait of this guy. Nowadays there may be at least half of the 10 mountains in the wild. Especially after the discussion between Zhou Xian and the Zhongtu Confucian temple, this young but famous hermit became even more famous. He was in Howren, but he was in the limelight in the barren world for a while. It seems that if a gas trainer does not know the name Qin Pingon, it is equivalent to not cultivating the Tao. 100 years ago, a certain sword spirit of the Great Wall had a reputation only in the Zhongmen Xinfu, which was halfway up the wild mountainside. He never wanted to emerge as the last hidden official. Qin Pingon looked at the woman Wufu. Are you going to give it a try? In the crown of Qin Ping's head, there is a lotus dojo where even Yi Waterfall can't see the slightest. While practicing boxing, Lu Chen squinted at the ignorant lady and said, I'm about to move, I'm really about to move. Yi Lu uttered a voice to block the woman around him. White blade, don't be rude. Byron squinted and smiled. I think I can give it a try, provided that the hidden officer is willing to punch with pure martial arts. Okay. When Qin Pingon spoke, he stepped forward with his fingers close together, and seemed to lightly press against the bladed forehead. The female Wufu flew out with a bang, smashed the railing behind and straightened a line and fell directly out of the Yuban city. Yi Bao, who was fighting between heaven and man, had a sharp change in his mind. After quickly weighing the pros and cons, he chose not to take action. The entire capital city, the originally still-colored glaze realm, moved the whole body as soon as it was hit by a white blade, and a crack appeared immediately. After that, the cracks around the cracks continued to crack open, and finally the jade version of the city seemed to be suddenly splendid. Pouring rain. Fairyland swordsmen couldn't even split the formation with a single sword, just a lightly understatement of the finger. It broke with the touch. Boxing? Not like. The most terrifying thing was that the young sword repairman in front of him seemed to have never deliberately used swordsmanship. Yi Bao finally began to wonder whether Qin Pingon in front of him was the watchdog of the Great Wall of Jianqi. Qin Pingon smiled and said, Yi Waterfall, if I go to the building to get the sword by myself, I won't count it as borrowing it, it's called robbing. Yi Waterfall smiled bitterly. Is there a difference? I played dozens of times and then the Jade City will probably be gone. Qin Pingon opened his hand, clearly indicating to Yi Waterfall to hold on tightly. You should be glad that the Jade City is not the fairy hairpin city, otherwise it is gone. Xinjiang City, known as the highest city in the wild. This city is just near the last mountain city of Sanshanfu. Yi Bao sighed faintly in his heart. The emperor of the Moor dynasty, worthy of his first-class ambition, actually took the initiative to open the restrictions, operate the secret method, remove the 18 landscape restrictions, beckoned and control from the building. Here comes a red coral pen holder that was originally suspended, and a sword array flying sword like a pen is placed on it. With a light push, Yi Bao pushed the red coral pen holder to the weird Daoist who had turned into a hermit. He smiled and said, I hope Daoyochin can safely leave the wild world. Qin Pingon put the pen holder and Feijian into his sleeve together. Then I will borrow your auspicious words as a gift, and also send you a sentence. I hope this Jade City is strong enough and your ascension level is strong enough. After confirming that the uninvited guest had left Jade City, Yi Bao was not eager to find the white blade of the queen, but instead let go of his divine consciousness and began to count silently in his heart. Can't blow you up. That pen holder was an immortal soldier and half of the flying swords exploded at the same time. If he was a pinnacle of ascension, he would be seriously injured. As for the other party's serious injury, Yi Lu only needs to follow that movement to retrieve at least half of the flying swords, and at the same time kill a strong enemy on the mountain. As a result, Yi Waterfall finished the calculation and was dumbfounded. Why did he lose the traction with that sword formation? Just this. Inland of the dojo rolled up his sleeves, then continued to walk the pile and said with a smile, "Under the eyelids of the poor road I have a lot of skills in the formation, interesting, simple and cute." Qin Pingon immediately rushed to the fairy hairpin city after offering to fragrant incense in the second mountain city. Rumor has it that this high city was transformed by the hairpin of the first monk in the world. However, the reason why it can be called the #1 city in the wild has a great relationship with its high terrain. After Ning Yao arrived at the Xianxia ferry crossing outside Yubon City, he walked along the water and then went on to the next place. Only after Qi Tingji and Lu Ji arrived, the two Xianxia's hearts said for no reason what seemed to be waiting for them, "Cut down that jade city. If you don't have enough incense, just stick incense." Qin Pingon was located 100 miles outside of Xinjiang City, on the top of a small mountain. The reason why he was able to record files in the Summer Palace was because of the light of the high city. After respecting the incense, Qin Pingon squatted down with his sleeves in both hands, stretched out his sleeve with one hand, twisted a handful of soil, held it in his palm and gently twisted it. Lu Chen asked curiously, "In that jade city, why did you manage to make a move still so subtle?" Lending Qin Ping N's 14 realms of Taoism, Lu Chen doesn't have any hidden secrets. This can be described as a savage world full of enemies. He casually waved his sleeves. It was a magical power like a heavenly calamity. Exaggeration, but whether in Baihua City or Yubon City, Qin Pingon is very restrained. What's more unreasonable is that every time Qin Pingon takes a shot, it is a once-in-lifetime experience on the road. Today's methods are hardened, just like the ferry crossings on the road in the future, which can ensure that Qin Pingon will reach the summit faster. And the two sides had a tacit understanding, and Qin Pingon knew very well that Lu Chen would never do anything to ambush this matter. I'm used to going out of the lower 3 realms, but now it's a bit unsuitable to go out of thin air. Qin Pingon released his hand, scattered the soil on the palm of his hand and whispered softly, "So this way I have always reminded myself that it is easy to change from frugality to luxury, and from extravagance to frugality is difficult." Lu Chen nodded and then curiously asked, "Have you thought about the route of the last Sanshan talisman?" From his sleeve, Lu Chen took out the Huang Tingjing manuscript of the brothers' manuscript. This sutra was divided into 3 scenes, Lu Chen, Mrs. Wei, and Bai Yujing, a Taoist place with a Ji in the name. "Get one of each." Qin Pingon said, "Jiuquan sect, Yuding." The gas trainers of Jiuquan sect have nothing else but only one thing, brewing fine wine and many wild grape monsters including the rime of the old throne and the retreat, all take care of this sect. The Wooding River belongs to the waters of Ilua River. The path between the 2 places, the final place where the sword was handed over, was of course Tuyua Mountain. Qin Pingon asked, "Are you sure?" Lu Chen looked up at the moon, "About 60%. In the wild 3 rounds of the moon, 2 of them once had their masters, the owner of the Lotus Nunnery who has died and disappeared, and the Credit Month who now raises a group of ducks by the Longxi River. Only 1 round, 10,000 years it has always been a land without a master. The great monks on the top of the barren world can travel freely with their ability, but Tuyua Mountain is not allowed to build a place of cultivation." Lu Chen stretched his hand to the white jade plate in the middle and asked, "Why not try this moon?" Qin Pingon shook his head, "There is no certainty." Lu Chen deduced it and said, "I'm still 30% sure." Qin Pingon smiled and said, "It doesn't mean that you are not sure." Criminal Officer Haosu, after Qin Pingon decided to change his route, he quietly, flying up by himself with a Lu Chen talisman. In the end, Haosu will stay there to meet Qi Tingji and Lu Ji. Poetry: if you want to be 1,000 miles away, go to the next level. Xian family affairs: want to see the world in the moon. Qin Pingan's plan was to leave the wild world with only 1 round of months left. Qin Pingon clapped his hands, stood up slowly, took out a pot of wine, the Qingshan wine from his own wine shop, and took a sip of the wine. Qin Pingon raised the back of his hand, wiped the corner of his mouth and asked, 3 souls and 7 souls. It seems that the 7 souls are not very knowledgeable, but I saw at the Confucian temple that the 3 souls were the first to say that the 3 souls had a heaven and earth. Lu Chen stopped practicing boxing, sat cross-legged, folded his hands on his abdomen and said, "The place where the 3 souls go is the place where the most inquiries are made." The place where the heavenly souls go is the sky prison. Isn't there a saying called the soul flying outside the sky? How did you get here, don't you know now? And the place where the soul goes pays attention to a reincarnation of cause and effect, so it belongs to places like the capital of the underworld. As for some lonely ghosts who still linger in the sun after death, they are actually human souls. 7 souls follow this soul alone. The people's so-called soul flies away, this is how it is said. With our surnames, the real name of the monster race, there is a big way in the world. What souls in the people below the mountain are not holding back, and the air is hanging. The sayings that have been passed down from generation to generation have actually broken the secrets of things such as exhaustion, but they are only slightly vague. Qin Pingon nodded. Lu Chen asked with a smile, "You let Haosu go to the middle of the moon," as if he didn't even ask why. Qin Pingon answered the wrong question. "For example, there is a truth, I have talked about it for 10,000 years and replaced it with you, believe it or not? This principle is very simple. I am a sword repairman of the Great Wall of Sword Qi." Lu Chen looked stunned and smiled with his palm. "This is a wonderful word." Qin Pingon took a sip of wine, put the flask away, took a deep breath, squinted and stared at the fairy hairpin city. Lu Chen asked, "Next, let's go to the door first and make a few words with the master?" In the next moment, Qin Pingon had a point to his toe, and a mountain at his feet instantly collapsed and shattered. The avenue revealed the majestic image of a 14th-level monk. He stepped on the ground, raised his arm and hit the high city with a punch. Sword of Coming Chapter 857. A Taoist statue 5,000 feet tall hit the city of Xianxia with one fist. It was actually unable to penetrate the fairy hairpin city with a punch, not even able to really touch the body of the city, but smashed countless golden lights. But this punch, the Qi violent, made the 2 vassals of the fairy hairpin city where the fist fell. In the city, the weather was in chaos. One place was suddenly windy and rainy, and one place showed signs of heavy snow. In the 2 cities, the monsters and earth cultivators swayed and trembled, and the Qi practitioners who had not yet formed the golden core were in a better situation, and quickly sacrificed their destiny to help stabilize the Taoist heart. Resisting the awe-inspiring power that seemed to be the imminent calamity, all those who were cultivating felt that their minds were hit by a heavy hammer. Really the last hermit of the Great Wall of Sword Qi? When I heard that the hidden official might be a guest in the fairy hairpin city, for a while many female officials of the fairy hairpin city such as Yingyan Lizzie flew out one after another, each in those open areas, or looking up or overlooking the face. They were so energetic and circling, they were fortunate enough to see a living hidden official with their own eyes. Some kindly discouraged them from returning to the land of monasticism, but they all got their eyes rolled. Lu Chen stood on his toes in the Lotus Dojo, craned his neck and said in amazement, "This city is very heavy. Fairy Hair City is like a gas trainer with a pill cast by a soldier hanging behind him, unless it can crush the armor with one punch. Otherwise it will always be intact. In short, the tortoise shell is very big." On a larger scale, the Great Wall of Sword Qi and the Night Ship are actually the same formation method, the method of avenue movement. The first one was born out of the Tianting ruins. In the past years, the great ancestor of Yueshan Mountain took advantage of Qin Kingda's sword to open the way for Feixingcheng and lift the city to another world. Only then did he find the right opportunity to split the Great Wall of Jianqi into 2 and break the one. Lu Chen saw the female officials who didn't know the catastrophe was imminent, and laughed, looking forward to Qin Ping'an's visit to Baiyujing in the future. Liang made a trip to Baiyujing that year and he was amorous. The female officials in Xinjiang City in front of them were sentimental. The fairy sisters on the 12th floor of the 5th city, even if they had a bit of longing for Liang, after seeing the man spit and wipe his hair, it is estimated that those loves were also broken and passed away with the wind and never mentioned it again. In fact, Baiyujing does have a few sisters who are familiar with the 3 heads of sect. You must know that before that, Liang, who exchanged 2 punches with the second head teacher, was an outsider who was mentioned the most in Baiyujing in 100 years. The young hermit is not the case. After meeting, people will only feel that they are well-deserved. Lu Chen said, "Qin Ping'an, you will travel to the Qingming world in the future. You, brother, you and the person from the Ziki Tower do whatever you want. I am a person who neither cares nor helps my relatives. I stand on the sidelines and wait for your grievances. During the Qing dynasty I will go to visit Baiyujing such as Verdant City and Shenshao City. I must lead the way." "That's it, it's agreed." Qin Ping placed it on deaf ears, but handed another punch with his left hand in a cavalry formation. Luchan shut up immediately, feeling very guilty. Immortal Hairpin City is like a graceful goddess in a slim heaven and earth, covered in a robe that shields the sky and sun, but was punched out a huge depression. The fist hovered only a few dozen feet away from the mountain city. From a fairy family mansion, half the mountainside in Xianxia City, a young demon monk who served as the deputy city lord. The female nun, a fox-charming woman near the bed, rolled to the ground trembling. Her eyes were faintly resentful, and she reached out from the ground to attract a dress to cover the spring. He put on his clothes, hesitated for a moment, had no choice. The real body showed up, and a 1,000-meter-high immortal figure floated outside the house, angrily said, "Where is the lunatic? Why do you want to be an enemy of my fairy hairpin city, live enough, and anxious to reincarnate?" That person's face was another punch. Just reply. The big demon, who showed a 1,000-foot-like appearance, choked for a while. Fortunately, the heaven and earth aura of Xiandan City gathered again on its own, and took the straight punch of the lotus crown Taoist. This fist chi is even more powerful as a rainbow. For the monks in Xiandan City, the vision within the city is the surging wind in the city, and countless auras quickly converge into a sea of clouds. The white clouds are like an erected vanity mirror. Before that punch, and then there was a punch that messed up the sea of clouds. His fist was suddenly as big as a mountain, as if it was about to hit the monk's eyes in the next moment. The young hidden official with the majesty of the law shattered the white clouds with one punch. At this time, this person only taught the female officials of Xianxia City, turning their minds into emotions. In the wild world there is only one truth, and the strong is respected. At the highest point of Xiandan City is a forbidden alchemy room. An old monk with a fairy wind road bone was originally holding a cat fan and staring at the pill furnace. After 3 punches by the uninvited guest, he had to walk out of the house and stand against the railing. Looking down at the lotus crown, he smiled and said, "Can fellow Taoists stop talking? If there is a misunderstanding, just let it go." In sight, the Taoist is half a city high. Fist shakes Gao-Cheng. Although the ascended city lord looked complacent, he was actually very worried. The kind who didn't come would be unkind, and he didn't know why he got such an uninvited guest. It is reasonable to say that Xianyan City is in the wild world, and it seems that there are no mortal enemies. Moreover, Xianyan City and Tuiyue Mountain have always had a good relationship, especially the previous battle that invaded the vast world, the Wild 60 military accounts. Nearly half of them the big demon had done business with Xiandan City. Not long ago he also dedicated Feijian to trust Yueshan, and sent an invitation letter with Jian Xiu Firen, who had become a co-lord of the world, hoping Firen would come to Xiandan City. It is best that Firen cannot hesitate to write. The 4-character book adds a brand new plaque to his family and shines through the ages. And Firen wrote back a letter, agreeing to the matter, saying that he would be a guest in Xianxia City in the near future. Unexpectedly, the fascinating Taoist priest had arrived first. "The last time I suffered was a disaster. The ancestor who moved to the mountain by the real name Zhu Wei in his early years on the way to congratulate the concubine of Zhou Xian, once passed by with a long stick and Yujian on his shoulders. I just felt that the city was too high. Too annoying." Zhu Li showed his true body with full strength, slapped dozens of sap on a fairy hairpin city. It just failed to completely break the prohibition. Although Xianxia City was indeed precarious and crumbling at the time, it never hit the city with a baton. However, some rumors later only circulated on the top of the wild hills. It was the former city lord of Xianxia City who broke his fortune privately. Disappeared. After that catastrophe, Xianxia City, after thousands of years of painstaking management, continued to build and repair the landscape formation, which is not what it used to be. Qin Pingon shook his wrists and practiced his hands with 3 punches first. The big sleeves swayed, and the surrounding area of Xiandan City was originally floating in a sea of clouds of varying heights, but the sleeves of the green gauze robes were shaken by a wrist movement. The sleeves swayed randomly for a few times, sweeping away all the clouds. And empty become cloudless. The old Feixing, who is the lord of the city, is still amiable and said with a heart, "Friends of the Daoists can discuss what they ask for and what they are. As long as we can get it, we are willing to give it to the Tao. Friends, it's just to make friends, to form an incense relationship with fellow Daoists." Of course, he wouldn't mistake the Taoist in the 14th realm with a high probability of being in harmony with Chen Pingyan. This concealed Taoist friend in front of him must have displayed a blindfold. What kind of Taoist attire, What sword-like Great Wall hidden official face? Only a few years after Qin Pingon returned to Hauran. Step back 10,000 steps and say, even if there is a good thing about falling from the sky, you can fall into the 3 realms once you fall. Any jade realm in the world who can hold this great gift. Back then, Tueshan's Li Jin couldn't catch it, even today's Taoist closed disciple Xianxia couldn't catch it. So as long as the other party is still willing to conceal his identity, it is probably not an unsolvable feud, there is still room for maneuver. Qin Pingon glanced north, retracted his gaze and asked Lu Qin in his heart, the law can only be so high? Is Zhang Jiaolu hiding himself? It is said that on the top floor of Xiandan City, if a monk leans on a railing and looks into the distance as long as he has enough eyesight, he is destined to not see the top of Tuyue Mountain or the head of the Great Wall of Jianqi. Therefore there is a proud statement circulating in Xiandan City, Hauran has a cloud in his poems, and dare not speak loudly for fear of shocking the heavens. But here we have to change the way of thinking because people did not dare to whisper that day, lest they be heard by the monks in our city. Lu Qin smiled and said, a big man, private money after all, it is a little bit. At the moment the Taoist Dharma, the foundation of the Tao, is the 5,000 characters handed down by the Taoist ancestors, so it is as high as 5,000 feet, not high or low. Well, as the third head teacher of Bai Yujing, Lu Qin has been a little disciple of the Taoist ancestor for thousands of years, and of course he will have his own Taoism. If it weren't for Lu Qin's advocacy and insisted on accepting apprentices on his behalf, then Lu Qin, the third disciple, would naturally become a veritable Taoist Guanmen disciple after a few more years. But for some reason, it seems that Lu Qin deliberately avoided the matter and abandoned the title himself. Lu Qin asked with a smile, it's actually very simple to want to be higher. Have you not turned a page of my 3 books until now? It's all right, just take this opportunity to browse. If Qin Pingon hasn't read the South China Sutra yet, it would be simple. Today's Qin Pingon, as long as he is willing to delve into the Taoist book and spread it out. It is like a divine help with a kind heart. After reading it again you will get its true meaning. Everything will come to pass because Qin Pingon is now in a position where the mysterious sergeant hears the Tao, and he is a veritable satisfied person. Qin Pingon smiled and said, compared with Taoist ancestors who have only 5,000 essays, your 380,000 words, is the number of words a bit too much? Knowing and leisurely talking about Zhangzhan, but you say it yourself of. Obviously Qin Pingon has read the South China Sutra. In Bai Yujing's Nanhua city, the Taoist official was officially included in the Dao genealogy ceremony. The least cumbersome was that Lu Qin casually threw out a later engraved version of the Nanhua Sutra. Lu Qin said solemnly, only one is far less than one, more than 9,999 is more than enough, don't be more greedy. On the bank of Qin Pingan's Heart Lake, outside the library, 3 ancient Taoist books of varying thickness appeared, hanging side by side in the air. If there was a wind of turning, the pages of the Taoist scriptures would be turned over. Lu Qin suddenly palmed his hand with a boxing hand and said with grief, Qin Pingan, at any rate it is a Dao sect recognized by the Dao sect. Why is it not qualified to be placed in the book building? After Qin Pingan www. Novel. Com, the original half-city high Dharma image obtained a copy of the entire Taoism of the South China Sutra, which is 3,000 feet higher out of thin air. To beat the drum style of the gods hand fists to this high city. Qin Pingon reminded, Master Lu, please don't be idle and continue to draw the 3 moon charms. If you delay business I'm fine here, but Mr. Qi Lao Jianxian and Mr. Lu may not be easy to talk. The criminal officer Haosu took the lead to soar into the moon, when Haosu would use a flying sword's natal magic power to attract the other 3 sword repairmen to the sky. Lu Qin said bitterly, you can't catch an honest person and bully you to death like this. Borrowing the treasures of the master and the 14 realms of Taoism to Qin Pingon, borrowing the sword box to the dragon elephant sword sect, drawing the 3 mountain charms at no cost, buying and selling sword washing charms with Qi Tingji and giving away the moon charm. This far tour, dare to love to the end. He is an outsider who is not a sword repairer, the busiest. Qin Pingon delivered the first punch towards Science Hanqing. The fairy hairpin city shook and the ground shook thousands of miles around and countless gullies were torn out on the ground, the mountains trembled, the river changed its course and visions grew. The 8,000 meter tall Taoist figure moved horizontally, and his second fist hit the high city. There were many immortal mansions in the city that were originally elusive. There were towering old trees with branches and leaves falling from the heights. The snow-white waterfall that fell straight down seemed to freeze instantly, like an ice all hung under the eaves, and then waited until the third punch fell on Xiandan City. The waterfall exploded again and heavy snow was flying. Lu Chen squinted his head and couldn't bear to look straight. According to the archives of the Summer Palace, the main avenue of this fairy hairpin city was refined from the hairpin of the first monk in the world. It was just one of the pioneers of that ancient battle. Unfortunately, he fell on his way to the sky. The Dao Fa collapsed and dissipated between the heavens and the earth. Only the white jade hairpin in the hair bun was preserved intact, but was left in the world. On the earth, she was nowhere to be found, and was eventually picked up by a female cultivator with profound blessings in the barren world of later generations. She was considered to have obtained this avenue inheritance, and she was the founder of the fairy hairpin city. After entering the 5 realms of the body, the female cultivator began to build the fairy hairpin city, and at the same time established sects, spreading branches and leaves, and finally in the hands of the 4 major monks of the city lord, making great efforts to govern and making money, and the fairy hairpin city is built higher and higher. The current city lord of Fairy Hair City is a great monk in the ascending realm. He is proficient in the 3 avenues of forging, formation and alchemy. He has friends all over the world. He also has a deputy city lord of the Fairyland Cultivation base. The Daoist name Yinlu is a direct disciple of the current city lord. He is a master of room art. He once bought a female cultivator of the Yulong sect with the Wild Army account in advance. Unfortunately, he was taken by the throne. The big demon Chim quickly ascends first, stripping the beauty. Otherwise, there will be hundreds of more Yulong sect female cultivators in the city of Immortal Hairpin. If a named disciple of Xianxia has cultivated for 100 years and has not been able to be among the earth immortals, he will be expelled from the land and removed from the landscape genealogy of the ancestor hall of Xianxia. What will happen after that is death or alive depending on his ability. Dixian disciple. If within 500 the monk fails to enter the 5 realms, the fairy hairpin city will not drive people according to the ancestral rule, no waste empty spiritual energy once the deadline directly kill on the spot, all walks, landscape and luck, demon pill, skin bag all return to Xianxia city. Therefore the number of direct disciples of Xiandan city has always been small, but the ancestral temple incense is not precarious, because the Jade Pu realm and the earth's celestial monks in the wild world come here to serve as worship and guest, as many as those who cross the river. Christian carp. As long as the money is enough, you can stay in the city for cultivating. The fairy hairpin city is like an acquired cave sky, full of aura and thick like water, which is extremely suitable for cultivation. In addition, the female officials carefully cultivated in Xianyan city were used to marry with the dynasty of the mountain and the sect on the mountain. The peach and flower makeup of the water fine hairpin, the colorful robes and the water and moon shoes are even more famous in the wild world. Lu Xian certainly knew why Qin Pingon would make a special trip to Xianxia city. If it's just that Xianxia has been bragging about itself, what is the highest city in the world or the official lane with the newly promoted throne great demon, what kind of in-law relationship is it with Qin Pingan's character? Surely it's not like that. Compete. Because the weapons forged in Xianxia city, the robes refined in Jinsui city, and the Xinjia wine made by Jiuquan sect, are among the top 10 in the wild. The Great Wall of Sword Qi was broken by the wilds, and the fairy hairpin city, which was not found by a single monk, was reputed to be able to occupy a successful labor. Xiandan city continued to spend money to raise the city, of course, because it can make more money. Before being expelled from the city or killed in the city, any monk who was a direct descendant of Xianxia city is a well-deserved master of casting. He is proficient in weapon casting and magic weapon refining, because the city has a first-class blessed place, an ancient star that fell to the ground, making Xiandan city sit on a resource-rich natural arsenal, which can continuously cast armors and equipment on the mountain. Every 30 years, all the major dynasties in the wild world will send envoys to buy weapons here. The cultivators of Fairy Hairpin City will be sent there, and a large sum of money from the gods will be paid in. The Great Wall of Sword Qi and Hauran have been aggressively attacked before, and a large number of foundry masters have been gathered in Fairy Hair City, and they have been sent to the major military accounts. One of the few armored weapons. The Fairyland Big Demon Inlu came to the top floor, stood with the city Lord Master and said in his heart, It's not like a good talker. Xianpu's face was gloomy and he nodded and said, it's destined to be unkind. Yinlu asked, Master, how many punches can you hold that lunatic? After Xinjiang City started the big formation, every time he punched the opponent, it would cost a lot of fairy money. My family's fairy hairpin city has a thick family background, but the fairy money is piled up into a mountain. No matter how deep the foundation is, it will eventually be punched down. The loss of that fairy money will be painful. If the fairy money is converted into heaven and earth aura, being imprisoned in the city, it's still not enough to flow out of the fields, but the total loss of 36 large formation center fairy soldiers, half fairy soldiers and Jinshan treasures in Xinjiang City is an astronomical repair cost. The old ascendant cultivator stroked his beard and said, where is the boxing method? It is clearly Dao method. Even if the end of the martial arts is on the first floor, no matter how hard the fist is, it can still be harder than the force of the old ancestor who moved the mountain. In other words, if you want to break through the formation, you can only use one technique and one flying sword. At present it seems that the problem is not big. Back then Zhu Fei hit the city with 12 sticks. You need sticks to hit the same place. This guy in front of you is mostly out of reach. He came here to make a name for himself and he didn't expect to break the city. Xianpu's face was pale and he actually changed his mind. Quick Fei Jinchuan trust Yueshan and Yiluo, and told them that there are powerful enemies coming to invade Xinjiang City, and the strength is equivalent to a throne. It turns out that the unreliable Daoist method of punching is arrogant and unreasonable. It seems that the method of Taoism can be continuously stacked, and a punch is heavier than a punch. Old Ascension Realm thought about it a little and added, Old Throne. The two alchemy boys on the top floor turned into two messenger flying swords, leaving the fairy hairpin city in an instant, traveling thousands of miles away, faster than a great sword fairy's natal flying sword. Because they are not only true spirits refined from flying swords, but also use a superior talisman method, which is a big talisman that has a lot to do with the Baiyujing Lingbao city, with 2 lines of spiritual talisman inscribed, the meteor rushing to the moon Yulioha. As for how Xianyanqing learned this great charm from Baiyujing, of course it was bought with money. Xianpu said, Yinlu, you should immediately be responsible for the abbot's several sets of attacking big formations. In addition to delaying as much as possible, it is best to interrupt the opponent's continuous movement of punches. When the fairy Yinlu Yufeng left, he heard the once gentle and elegant master, cursed in an indignant tone, a monk on the top of a mountain must learn how to hand a fist from a reckless man, and he has a thick skin. Xuanpa's face became more and more ugly and the weather was uncertain. It turned out that the flying swords made by the 2 alchemy boys slammed and shattered without warning thousands of miles away. 2 broken talismans were falling on the way to the ground. Like suddenly, the 2 Baiyujing little Dao children had to obey the decree obediently as if they were ordered by their ancestors. They flew all the way back to Xinjiang City and bumped into the big sleeve of the Daoist Faxiang. The immortal Yinlu, who is the deputy city lord, can no longer care about these trivial matters and said with a grinning smile, Open the door to welcome guests. Thousands of long swords formed a formation, and from a mansion in Xianyan City, smashed into the head of the Daoist Faxiang. In addition, there is a long river of Fulu, which rises into the sky in clusters at the foot of the mountain, like the longest celestial rope in the world, trying to wrap one arm of the Daoist man. Yinlu snorted coldly, spreading his heartfelt message about the immortal residences throughout the city, informing all the foreign hermits who came to this cultivator, don't be stupid to watch the excitement. Everyone, don't just stand by and watch. I believe that no one can get the least bit of a favor when the evil lion breaks the prohibition. It's just that the 2 long rivers of sword formation and Fulu, coupled with the shots of many chi practitioners in Xinjiang City, whether it is magical magic or attacking heavy treasures, without exception all have failed. It seems that the Daoist Faxiang does not exist in this world. However, the Daoist can punch non-stop, falling firmly on the fairy hairpin city. The long river of swords swept past the head of the Daoist Faxiang. The long rope of the talisman was just a loose knot in the void. Immortal hairpin city can only retreat to the second place, focusing on the formation of defenses, large and small mansions, and the archways and couplets above the main road. The brilliance flows everywhere, shining brightly, shining through the area of thousands of miles. In particular, the list of signed books are all beautiful words with the meaning of Taoism, and the merits are forever. Xiongguan in the world. Indestructible. Haiyan Tianqi. Feng Shui is the most prosperous. They can all contribute to the already strong enough fairy hairpin city. The price is the true meaning of the Taoism contained in these list books, which gradually dissipates as if to join a city. The big monks in the city also offered several talismans, palm-sized talisman papers, which were as big as a mountain in an instant, or the spirit of the talisman was like a river pouring down, and they covered the city together as if putting on a piece of tricks for the fairy hairpin city. Robe. Obviously it is daytime, but there is a ray of bright moonlight falling on the white jade rail, carved with jade. The moonlight is like water, and the pine shadows are full of steps like a dream and fantasy. Near the waterfall in the city, there is a wooden bridge across the mountain, and there is a man who helps the deer, followed by a pair of book girls and maids carrying a suitcase. The old monk who stopped on the bridge first waved his sleeves to disperse those chaotic waterfalls. The old man looked elegant and looked at the huge face that kept punching. He sighed. Painful, he was nothing but after traveling I came to Xinjiang city to visit the Immortals and paid for a few scrolls. How could they be exposed to this unseen disaster in 1,000 years? The old man took out an antique picture of a sleeping ape on the mountain from his sleeve, and the scroll was thrown out. After outside the bridge, an old ape with a height of thousands of feet appeared in the painting. One stepped on the void and jumped high to meet the punch of the Buddha. As a result, the old ape with a golden line on its back was blocked by the man. A punch was instantly crushed. On the top of the waterfall, there is a towering archway with the word Long Men on the top of the waterfall. There are two masters of the world sitting against each other across the water. One of them is painting. First I drew a few birds, charming and lovely, lifelike, fluttering wings and flying high. The mist rose above the scroll, and the aura of the landscape followed the birds and scattered together to stabilize the fairy hair city formation. Tracing the mountains and rivers, in order to charm the way. With a sound of misty birds, thousands of mountains and rivers are full of wind and smoke. This old monk who served as a guest Qing was named Slim Mei. He boasted that he had no talent in his life and only painted the plum blossoms. Another person throws a talisman into the water, and then there is a huge pond, slowly surfaced. It is using its own weight and natural powers to help Xiandan city stabilize the roots and water transport. All sorts of strange sights and visions in the city were shaking after the punch outside the city. Even if the aura of Xiandan city is getting more and more abundant, and there are large formations from the hands of different monks, like mushrooms after the rain, layers of Taoism bless the city, but it still can't stop the punch from the punch. The violent turmoil, the vibration of Gaoqing became more and more exaggerated. Some monster monks with insufficient realm, pale and horrified, could only tremble with the god's money on them, as long as it was not Gu Yuqian, even Zhou Xian was included. Squeeze a smash and use a little bit of strength just for the fairy hair city to be able to produce more auras. The old man with the title of Thin Plum sighed. Such a high level of beauty, not to mention seeing it, is unheard of. The monk who threw the talisman in the pool nodded. It's not just high. This man has no scum and morality. Upon closer inspection he looks like a seamless pagoda of Buddhism. Wild monks, if they restore the true body of the demon race, it is largely an alternative road manifestation, similar to a kind of avenue migrating. There are pros and cons to this move. After all, hard practice is to form a personal body for the general situation. Even if you encounter a life and death battle, you must fight to the death if you have to fight to the death. The monks of the monster race will still not easily recover their true bodies, because they will wear down their Taoism and imperceptibly weaken their own Taoism. Compared with the real body of the demon race, the monks' sacrificial phenomena are relatively less restricted, but they are hollow and dense. They are of course different from a piece of tofu and a stone. And some monks specialize in work the matter of Dharma and Xiang, and use mystery to deter and frighten hostile monks who don't know the truth. The unknown Taoist who descended from the sky in front of him visited Xinjiang city inexplicably, and then smashed the city without saying a word. His Dharma image was too shocking. Just talk about the same way, maybe the Lotus Nunnery who occupies a savage round of bright moon, and the old master of Luyuo who occupies a lot of water transportation, can barely make this step. It's just that the former has died and disappeared. The latter heard that Lu Qi, who had returned to the world, was intercepted near Guishu, and was finally detained by the Central Earth Confucian Temple in the volcano that was overwhelmed by the Tao. The old monk with the Taoist name Shomei wondered, really that young hidden official? But when he was in the city head, wasn't he the Yupu realm? According to the news from Zhou Xian at the time of the discussion, the realm of Brother Qin Pingon remains the same, but the realm of martial arts from the mountain state to the end. Opposite friends are having fun in their hardships, while constantly drawing dragon symbols and throwing them into the water to increase the water transport of the dragon gate, while smiling and joking. If the hidden official is left as a guest, you can ask yourself, that crown look like a token of Bai Yujing's 3 masters? Is it a fake? It is said that the owner of the Lotus Nunnery has spent countless treasures, and hasn't it been done and has failed every time? No, who of us in the wild world can do such a feat? The monk painter glanced at the lotus crown on the top of the Taoist's head, and said helplessly, the truth seems to be unimportant. In case we can't keep the fairy hairpin city together, everything will rest. The realm is too great, the Taoist slapped casually. You can shoot us ants to death. But if Xianxia city can bear this catastrophe and the storm settles down, it will be another mountain beauty that can be passed down for thousands of years. Besides, didn't you make a special trip to the Great Wall of Sword Qi before, and painted a landscape painting for the young hidden official? Brother Shomei, you can actually burn incense now and pray that the person outside the city is Qin Pingon. Maybe you can still have that ray of life on this basis. Okay, I'll beg for you when the time comes. The old monks sitting on both sides of the dragon gate were swaying with the fairy hairpin city. The 2 old friends joked with each other, but they looked at each other and found that each other was smiling bitterly. By the way, how many punches did this guy hand out in total? There are almost 25 punches. The only hope right now is to pray for that brilliant, who is on the way to Immortal Hairpin City. At this moment, on the side of the Long Men plaque of the Archway building, there was a slightly smiling warm voice, which was the most authentic and wild and elegant, saying, my Firen brother also come to Xianxia city as a guest? A green-shirt guest with a long sword and sleeves with both hands stood on top, lowered his head and smiled at the old monk with the name of Thin Plum. Now that he was in the 14th realm, he could do something similar to the ancient traveling out of his body. Therefore it takes diligence to practice ascending. Before punching, Qin Pingon had secretly sneaked into Xianxia city, traveling all the way as if entering the land of no one, looking around for those big formation centers, but he didn't rush to move. In the Lotus Dojo above the Buddha statue outside the city, Lucian squatted on the ground, stretched out his hand to cover his face, sighed, and suddenly started not expecting Qin Pingon to travel through the world. The 2 monks suddenly looked up at the same time, their expressions horrified. Flawless body, the atmosphere of harmony between man and nature. The old monk with the name of Thin Plum blankly looked at the green-shirt guest who was not wearing a crown or robe. His face was naturally familiar. After all, he was so tall that he was standing outside the city. I saw the green-shirt guest flicking his fingers. The old cultivator of Xianxia Kiching, who was constantly drawing symbols and throwing water, exploded on the spot like a soybean with his body, soul and Jin Dan Yuanying. The green-shirt guest smiled and said, I want to ask you something. The old monk shut up and waited to die. Qin Pingon seemed to have changed his mind and smiled. You turn around to help my Firen brother, saying that this time Qin Pingon is a guest at Xianxia. It's a coincidence. It was the return gift of Huang Huaguan in the early years. And then there was another gift on the Wooding River, which is my celebration of Brother Firen's ascension to the Wild World Co-Master. The old monk was dull and speechless, murmured, Are you really the hidden official Qin Pingon? It's a pity that the opponent's figure disappeared in a flash. The city lord Xuanpu, even if he was a great cultivator of the Ascension realm, had no desire to do it himself. Not that he didn't want to retreat from the enemy himself, but he didn't dare to leave the city to die. Xuanpu is really not good at catching and killing each other. After Xuanpu handed out 20 punches outside the city, his face was as gray. According to this posture, without 10 punches he would really break through the city. Xuanpu gritted his teeth and went straight to the ancestor hall of Xianxia city, hanging 3 pictures. The hanging statue in the center is a portrait of a woman, young and beautiful, with a white jade hairpin on the head. The other 2 are the 2nd and 3rd lord of the fairy hairpin city. Under each of the hanging images, there is an incense burner on all the altars, except for the woman who founded the mountain, and there are also 2 oil lamps on the altar. After Yi worshipped the incense, Xianpu took out 2 porcelain bottles from his sleeves and began to add sesame oil. The 2 bottles of sesame oil were of an unusual golden color. After Xuanpu respected the incense and added oil, he said in a deep voice, "The fourth generation of City Lord Xuanpu, implore Master and Patriarch for protection." An old man painted in a portrait with hair like a halberd, ripples on the surface of the hanging image and sneer oozing out. He opened his mouth and asked Xuanpu, "How tired is it than that of Zhu?" Xuanpu's face was bleak. He bowed his head and replied respectfully, "Return to Master, there is nothing worse than that." In addition, the hanging portrait with a higher level of seniority is an old woman-like female nun. In the portrait, holding a whisk in her hand, she said hoarsely, "Couldn't it be an old throne who left the customs by chance?" Xuanpu replied with a trembling voice, "Return to the ancestor. The disciple's son does not know the other party's roots and feet for the time being, but dare to guess that the other party is not a wild monk." Xianxia contributed to these two ancestors, and at most 3 opportunities. Zhu Wei visited the door before and he has already used each one. In addition, today's time, it means that if there is another reduction in truth, the two are deliberately planning a way out. The Patriarch, who is concealed in the secret realm of Yin and Ming, who has worked hard to cultivate, I am afraid that there will be no chance to return to the Yang room. Therefore, it is not that Xuanpu feels distressed by the 2 bottles of priceless golden sesame oil, but the 2 ancestors of Xianxia will be distressed. If there is a third time for his own Dao life, if Xuanpu is still the lord of the city, even if the 2 ancestors can protect the fairy hairpin city in the next catastrophe, Xuanpu will definitely not be able to protect his life anyway. The old man stepped out of the hanging statue and laughed, "Then I'll go and meet this dying fellow for a while. Within the 3 sticks of incense he can stay in the Yang room without worrying about being found by those extremely difficult Yinming officials. It's just that this Master Xuanpu, who has just landed in the Patriarch Hall, has a sword-backed outsider in a blue shirt and long coat on the threshold. He is leaning on the door with his shoulders and sleeves with both hands. His smiling face is brilliant. I never thought there would be more than 2 big fish slipping through the net. The hospitality of Xiandan City is really flattering, and you must come often when you have the opportunity." The old woman immediately told the other 2 people in her heart, "Quick battle and quick decision, we work together to kill this Yin god." Isolated from the world by the fairy hair city formation, even if it is a thrown great demon standing at the pinnacle of the Ascension realm, standing here with a Yin spirit out of his body, he needs to face 3 ascended realm monks at the same time. Even if the opponent is an unknown 14th realm great monk, Xinjiang City has some chance of winning. The premise is not to allow this Yin god to merge with the real body and dharma of the Daoist outside the city. Qin Pingon had already quietly shot between the electric light and flint, and knocked over the 2 incense burners on the table together with the oil lamps, especially the golden sesame oil in the oil lamps, and slid straight into the picture. He smiled and said, "My dear, get back." The old woman screamed and quickly returned to the picture scroll. With her big sleeves rolled, the wind was rolling, she was still unable to knock back the long golden thread. Once the golden sesame oil from the sun, even a drop of it in the place of cultivation, it will be big. The sight of the sun rising into the sky, what is there to hide? She had to be hard-hearted and throw out the whisk, so that she could not bear a drop of golden sesame oil into the picture scroll. At the same time she stretched out her hand and grabbed the hanging statue that belonged to her. The scrolls came together in an instant, and it seemed as if a dry palm stretched out from a whirlpool and quickly grabbed the scroll, and was finally taken to Yin Ming by her. It was even the last opportunity of Immortal Hairpin City to ask the gods to come down. And the old man was a bit slow in his movements, obviously not as experienced as the master. Although the golden thread was stopped, the picture scroll was stretched out and held by the green shirt guest. Xuanpu was dumbfounded and at a loss. Qin Pingon looked at the old city lord of the fairy hairpin city. "Either fight with me within the 3 sticks of incense, and when your figure dissipates I will ask Xuanpu Jingxiang to add oil, and we will continue to relive the old days. Or you do it yourself and kill this disciple who almost deceived the ancestors." Once Xuanpu died, no one in Xianxia would know how to reduce the truth. Then the picture scroll in my hand of course became a worthless one. Waste paper. Qin Pingon raised the scroll in his hand and shook it gently. "What do you say?" The old man waved. Xuanpu was so scared that his guts were splitting. "Master, don't fall into the divorce of this fellow. Master and apprentice work together, there is still a chance of winning." But the old ancestor of Xinjiang City, he didn't even bother to talk nonsense with Xuanpu, a trash disciple who had not succeeded or failed. He directly slammed a natal spell on Xuanpu, and at the same time he slowly left the ancestor hall. The green-shirt guest at the gate asked, "Who are you?" The swordsman in Qingshan stopped, and when he turned his head to look around he smiled. There are also a pair of pure golden eyes. The old ancestor in the patriarch hall was silent, and immediately stopped asking questions. He just killed Xuanpu quickly and solved this trouble. There are 2 masters and apprentices in the house. Relatively speaking, Xuanpu suffered too much. After all, the master had been practicing the ghost way for thousands of years. Before a stick of incense, an ancestor hall was soon torn down by the 2 masters and apprentices. The ascending realm great monk Xuanpu, the current city lord of Xinjiang City, just died in the hands of his master. Qin Pingon had nothing to do, and after confirming that Xuanpu was dead, he threw the hanging statue in his hand and went to the alchemy site on the top of the mountain. At the last glance, Qin Pingon was actually not looking at the pair of masters and disciples who turned against each other, but the founder of the fairy hairpin city with a hairpin on the top. The portrait of the woman seemed to open the sky. She glanced at the back of the blue shirt and she sighed faintly. With a sound, it seemed as if I had met an old friend and I didn't seem to be sure of the other party's identity, and then a picture scroll burned out on its own. Lu Chen squatted in the dojo rubbing his chin. If the young mountain master of Luopa Mountain had picked Xinjiang Mountain with his sword, he was practicing his hand for the upcoming sword to cut the mountain. So today, if you don't rush to shake Xinjiang City, how can it be like warming up for Bai Yujing in the future? Isn't South China City going to be affected by Qiyu? So Lu Chen didn't expect Qin Pingon to enter the 14th level as soon as possible. And outside the city, Qin Pingon destroyed the #1 city in the world with the spirit of beating the drums, which he learned from the awe-inspiring Wu Fu Cui Cheng. The same fist moves, fists are delivered as if the fist intent is superimposed endlessly. Thousands of miles of mountains and rivers centered on Xinjiang City, all felt the vibration of countless thunderous thunder exploding at the same time under the earth and high places in the world. One punch completely penetrated the mountain and water restrictions of Xinjiang City, and the fist of that human figure finally touched the real body of Gaocheng. With another punch, most of the arms of the Daoists Faxiang like a mountain chisel fell into the fairy hairpin city. The third punch directly penetrated the entire city of Xinjiang, with the entire arm traversing the city, and then swept back and forth with one arm, and the highest city in the world was beaten in 2. The upper half of the sloping and collapsing Gaocheng was held on the side by the Taoist Faxiang, and pushed out with great force. It fell to the ground hundreds of miles away and the raised dust covered the sky. As for the remaining half of the high city, the Taoist Faxiang interlaced his hands and 10 fingers, folded his fist, lifted it high and slammed it down quickly, hitting half of the city continuously deep into the ground.